cleaning my mess. Okay.
Many of these often come with a low gear range. Which means off-road, you can select that low gear range, you have much more torque, and you can crawl very slowly over specific obstacles. Now, this does not have a low gear range, but it does have that selectable two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. So does all of this mean that the BMW M5 can't use four-wheel drive on the road? Well, no, actually they've done something super clever, and so what they've done is they've put a multi-plate clutch within this transfer case, and what this does is it allows for a different torque split and varying speeds between the front and the rear axles. So it can send different speed to each axle, and as a result, that means you can go around corners without binding this transfer case, and you can fully vary the torque distribution. So that's a really neat thing that BMW's done. It acts a lot more like an all-wheel drive system when it's in this four-wheel drive mode, but it has that traditional transfer case where you can select to just use those rear wheels. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I have all kinds of videos covering different types of all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive systems that different manufacturers use. And it's also important to realize that different manufacturers use different systems internally for different products. So, you know, there's not just one company that makes the best four-wheel drive system. There's all kinds of variants even within a single company. So it's all about the individual system, not about, you know, what's the label of it, what's it called? Is it called, you know, 4MATIC or X-Drive or symmetrical all-wheel drive? They all mean you know, that's just a marketing term that means four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. The actual differences can be much greater than just simply that title. So if you are interested, I will include those links in the video description. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, of course, feel free to leave those below.
No.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final video of a series where I have teamed up with Formula E to talk about electric cars. Now in this video we're going to be discussing a very common question that gets brought up whenever you're talking about electric cars, and that is, are electric cars actually any better for the environment than a gasoline car? So there's three questions we're going to be answering in this video that I think are very commonly asked. First, doesn't producing electric car batteries produce a lot of emissions with it? Second, don't electric cars get their power from fossil fuels anyways, offsetting any emission benefits of those electric cars? And finally, isn't lithium mining terrible for the environment? Now, this is a highly discussed subject, and there's all kinds of information floating around out there. And so I want to start by saying that while yes, I have teamed up with Formula E for this video, who obviously likes electric cars. I'm not going to be using Formula E as a source of information for any of the information about whether or not electric cars are better or worse for the environment than gasoline cars. On top of this, I'm going to provide citations as well as links within the video description for all of the information provided in this video. And I do agree that it's a good idea, to go out there and look at different videos and that kind of thing. I just want to be sure that when you're doing so, try to see where that information comes from, because many of them out there don't include citations and you don't know whether or not you can actually trust the information provided. Okay, so it's a highly complicated topic, but I want to break it down into two main sections that I think get the most attention. First, emissions, and then materials and mining. So starting with emissions, we need to answer two questions. How much emissions are produced for vehicle production, and how much emissions result from vehicle usage? Based on these two parts of the equation, we can determine which vehicle is better overall for the life of the vehicle. Now, of course, there are emissions related to the vehicle's end of life, getting rid of it once it's no longer useful. However, a study out of Yale University found that end-of-life emissions for both electric cars and gasoline-powered cars is relatively low, very low in comparison to usage and production. So we're not going to be looking at end-of-life emissions in this video. Alright, so the first part of the question is vehicle production, and there's a wide variety of estimates out there as far as the carbon emissions required to produce a vehicle. Now that makes sense because there's a wide variety of vehicles out there. So I looked at about a dozen studies looking at what are the average emissions required to produce the average vehicle. And so I saw a low estimate, a study out of MIT, saying about 2 metric tons of carbon required to produce a vehicle. And then I saw a cost analysis saying as high as 17 metric tons in order to produce a vehicle. Now, every single study I looked at agreed that electric cars require more CO2 emissions to produce than gasoline-powered cars. And this is primarily because of the batteries. So they range from about 15% more emissions to about 70% more emissions. Now, this percentage is based on the size of the battery. So a small Nissan Leaf battery will require about a third of the carbon emissions to produce versus a larger Tesla battery. So it's important when you're buying an electric car that you buy the right size battery for your needs. For the purposes of this video, we're going to give the combustion engine every benefit of the doubt, and so we're going to assume that both of these vehicles require the same baseline of emissions to produce them, assuming you don't include the emissions required for the battery. And this is a safe assumption to make because most studies show that an electric car would actually have less emissions than producing an internal combustion car if it weren't for the battery. So we're going to start with that common baseline, and we will add on top of that the emissions required for producing the battery for just the electric car. From the wide range of estimates out there, let's simply say that it requires 10 metric tons of CO2 emissions to produce a new car. Now, whether or not that's high or low doesn't really matter all that much because we're giving the same number to both cars. Then we add the emissions for battery production. The studies I read showed a range of CO2 emissions for battery production from about 1 to 5 tons for a small battery, 30 kilowatt hours like in the previous Leaf, to about 6 to 17.5 tons for a larger battery pack, such as the 100 kilowatt hour pack in a Tesla P100D. So to play it safe, let's go with the higher estimates. So once again, we're giving the internal combustion engine the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so for the production of an average gasoline vehicle, we start with 10 metric tons of carbon emissions. For an electric car with a small 30 kilowatt hour battery pack, we have 10 tons of carbon emissions plus 5.3 tons of emissions for the battery. For an electric car with a large 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, we add 17.5 metric tons for the battery. So here we can clearly see that producing an electric car requires more emissions. Now it's time to get into vehicle use emissions. Thankfully, there are wonderful data resources on vehicle emissions, as this is something that is heavily regulated. So on every single vehicle Monroney, you'll see the emissions the vehicle produces. The US Department of Energy summarizes this data, and you can see that the average gasoline vehicle in the United States creates 11,435 pounds, or about 5.2 metric tons of CO2 emissions each year. This is while driving the national average of about 12,000 miles, or about 19,300 kilometers per year. That's an average commute of about 33 miles per day, which is well within the capability of any modern electric car. This is something you can verify looking at a vehicle Monroney sticker. Take this pickup truck as an example. It produces 528 grams of CO2 per mile. Multiply that by the average annual mileage, and you get 6.24 metric tons of CO2 per year, about 20% higher than the average US vehicle, which is at 5.2 metric tons per year. The Alternative Fuels Data Center also provides us with emissions for electric vehicles, and this is specifically based on the electric mix that provide charging for the electric vehicle. So a state like West Virginia, which is heavily coal dependent, will have much different numbers than a state like Idaho, which is heavily hydroelectric dependent. Looking at national averages, we can get a good idea of electric cars as a whole, which produce about 4,455 pounds of CO2 emissions each year, or about 2 metric tons. Now here comes the fun part where we can start making conclusions based on this data. If we take the amount of carbon for gasoline vehicle production and add to that the amount of annual emissions multiplied by T for time, and set this equal to the amount of carbon for electric vehicle production and add to that the amount of annual emissions also multiplied by T, then by solving for T, we get the exact number of years required in order for an electric car to have less lifetime emissions than a gasoline car. Putting in the numbers for the average gasoline vehicle in the United States against the average 30 kilowatt-hour battery electric car using the average energy mix, we find out that after just 1.67 years, an electric car is already producing less emissions than its gasoline competitor, with many, many years of useful life to come. In fact, even if you had to replace the battery, meaning you had the additional carbon of that second battery's production, you'd still break even in less than 3.5 years. And clearly batteries are going to last far longer than a couple years because manufacturers are providing 8-year, 100,000-mile warranties with them. Now, the story isn't quite as clean once you start getting into the higher capacity batteries. So doing the same car comparison with a 100 kilowatt-hour battery versus the average gasoline car results in 5.5 years needed to offset the carbon production. But 5.5 years is still way less than an electric car's useful life. Remember, these cars have very few moving parts and they require much less preventative maintenance than gasoline cars. And again, these are using conservative estimates for the carbon emissions related to battery production. If we go with more lenient estimates, a 30 kilowatt-hour electric car could offset its emissions in less than 4 months, and a 100 kilowatt-hour electric car in less than 2 years. Going back to national averages with conservative estimates, it's also important to see where your power comes from. For example, I live in the state of Idaho, where a small electric battery will be offset in just 1.1 years. And a larger electric car in just 3.6 years. If the majority of the state's energy comes from coal, however, like in West Virginia, a small EV takes 5.4 years, and a larger one takes as much as 17.8 years. So if you're driving a Tesla P100D in West Virginia, you're not doing the environment any favors. But you probably didn't have the environment in mind anyways when you were buying a crazy fast $135,000 sports sedan. Even using more generous carbon emissions numbers, it would take 6.1 years for a 100 kilowatt-hour electric car in West Virginia to produce less emissions than the average gasoline car. A smaller battery, however, would only take 1 year. So driving a car like the Leaf, even in a coal-powered state, is still better for the environment than a gasoline car. In fact, there isn't a single state in the US in which driving a purely gasoline-powered car is the greenest option. But likewise, driving an electric car isn't the best option in every state either, only in about half of the states. In the other half, it's better to drive a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid vehicle, which have smaller batteries and thus have less emissions. But as electricity production becomes greener in other areas, which it tends to do, an electric car becomes the best option. Now, these numbers bring up an interesting revelation because I had always thought it would be better to continue driving your old car rather than purchasing a new, cleaner car because you don't have the emissions related with producing that car. But it turns out the numbers show otherwise. Numbers show the vast majority of automotive emissions come from vehicle use in gasoline cars, not from production. If you were to buy a brand new, small battery electric car, from an emissions standpoint, the new car will be in the green in less than 5 years. So if you take two people and both of them are driving the same old gasoline car, and one of them sells today and buys an electric car, and the other continues driving the older car, in just 5 years, the electric car will be the greener option of those two scenarios. Now, I don't want this to imply that we should all be buying new cars all the time. Obviously, this isn't green, and when thinking about cars, obviously using a 3,000-pound object to transport, a 150-pound object is not the most efficient or green way of doing so. Riding your bike or walking is going to be a much greener option. But we are comparing between an electric car and a gasoline car. And so it's a myth to say between that comparison that an electric car is worse for the environment than a gasoline car. Okay, so we've talked about emissions, but I do want to briefly touch on lithium mining, because this is something that's often brought up when deeming electric cars not environmentally friendly in comparison to gasoline cars. So there's several things here. First of all, lithium makes up far less of an electric car's battery than you might think, only about 5 to 7%. It's latched onto because it's in the name, lithium ion battery. But in reality, there are elements like cobalt and nickel, which are actually more important. And these elements are also more profitable to recycle, which I've explained in a previous video talking about recycling electric car batteries. But is lithium mining horrible for the environment? So one of the interesting things about choosing to attack lithium as a way to say that electric cars are bad for the environment is that lithium is extracted in extraordinarily desolate places like the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is one of the world's leading producers of lithium. So lithium is extracted from a brine beneath desert salt flats and then brought to the surface, where you then evaporate off that water and you're left behind with this liquid goo of lithium and other components that you can further refine down to the lithium. And so it is a very water-intensive process, and that is an environmental consequence of mining for lithium. But from an ecological standpoint, this happens in an area where hardly any life forms could actually survive. Drilling for oil for gasoline-powered cars, on the other hand, often happens in more biodiverse and more ecologically fragile ecosystems, such as ocean floors or the tar sands in Canada, in addition to the more desolate areas like in Saudi Arabia, where the environmental impacts may not be quite as apparent. And again, I think it's worth repeating that I'm not saying that mining for lithium is good for the planet. It's just untrue to say that mining for lithium is worse than drilling for oil and taking large amounts of carbon out of the ground and placing it into the atmosphere. Now, on the subject of electric cars and getting more into Formula E acts as a testbed for many auto manufacturers which have been joining in, including Nissan for the start of the 5th season, where car swaps have been eliminated and one car is used for the full race. Each car gets just one battery, which has to last the full season, and there have only been 2 battery failures in racing over the first 4 seasons, which is pretty impressive when you compare this to how frequently other motorsports are replacing engines. They also produce the energy for charging the cars using glycerin generators for their clean emissions, and they track their environmental impact and how well they're improving it on their website, which is interesting to see a breakdown of. It's also part of their goal to be bringing Formula E to cities to help draw attention to how air quality can be improved in urban areas by using electric cars. Overall, the main takeaway from this video, which I think is pretty intuitive from the beginning, is that electric cars certainly aren't any worse for the environment than gasoline-powered cars, regardless of where your energy comes from to charge that electric car, and in the vast majority of cases, they're environmentally superior to gasoline cars. So thank you all so much for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, of course feel free to leave those below.
Up we go. Oh. I think there's anything. 27 feet a minute. Watch as we're going around this corner here. Being 7 millimeters thick does come with some drawbacks. All right. So see back here, you've got the hook there. That goes on these little knobby screws that we've got, the kind of washer things. Kind of tough to get it aligned here because you can't, so tight to the wall you can't really see. I think I'm kind of in the right spot. Just gotta kind of, oh no, I missed. I'm on. Just go up, yeah, I think you got it. We good? Okay, check this out. So the rest of it just clips on with magnets. So that's it. The W8. This is the best TV LG makes. You should get one, you know. Just 15 grand. 15 grand, yeah. I know, right? It's a good thing LG sent this thing. Ready to fire it up? And we're going to. But not until this message from Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon makes great t-shirts, socks, wallets, and more. They believe in simple shopping, and if you use code TechTips, you'll get 20% off your order at the link below. To get things kicked off, we hooked up our Xbox One and threw in Planet Earth 2 on 4K Blu-ray. As predicted, it is stunning. You got 4K, all sorts of HDR support, pretty much everything that you'd expect for 15 grand, to the point that you guys probably aren't even looking at me right now. You're probably looking at that. So then that's it. End of video, right? This TV is great. Well, no, because it has some problems. It's also out of reach for almost all of us. But the good news is you don't actually have to spend that much in order to get the same picture quality. Dropping down 12 inches to the 65-inch model cuts the price more than 50% to a mere 7 grand, which, okay, is still getting dangerously close to a year of college tuition. But if you don't need the wallpaper thinness, this exact same panel is used across LG's entire OLED lineup. And the only thing that differentiates the various price points is how fancy of a body style you want, except for the very cheapest one, the B8, which uses a lower tier processor. But is that a big deal anyway? Like the other 2018 models, the B8 still has support for Google Assistant and a relatively obscure but appreciated black frame insertion feature to help reduce jutter, which means that all it lacks are the benefits of LG's flagship Alpha 9 processor. Its quad-pass image processing to reduce banding, its AI object recognition to help increase depth and sharpness, and its frame interpolation technique to simulate 120 Hz refresh rate. Not necessarily things that matter to everyone, though if they matter to you, it's $200 more to bump up to the Alpha 9 equipped C8. Man, these guys love their letters and numbers, don't they? Speaking of an extra $200, if you're a real stickler for accurate color, then be prepared to shell out some more to have your screen professionally calibrated, because out of the box, even with the Technicolor Expert mode turned on, our particular panel didn't have great color accuracy, particularly with the primary pigments cyan, magenta, and yellow. It's actually quite a bit worse than what we measured on LG's own $2,400 LCD TV just a couple of weeks ago. We're not saying it's terrible. I mean, the average Best Buy shopper wouldn't notice. But it's pretty bothersome to me that at this price, you still need to toss an extra $250 to Geek Squad to get it calibrated. Now the good news is that we measured almost 94% coverage of the DCI P3 color space, so exceptional color reproduction is achievable on these TVs. Now comparing the W8 to Samsung's Q9F, the nicest TV that they make, you can see that they're both amazing displays. But even with full array local dimming, the Quantum Dot LCD display just cannot achieve the sharp contrast of an OLED. Check out the halo around the white letters. But when you make a super high-end product, you inevitably open yourself up to some scrutiny, and there are still some gripes, some of which were present in the W7 and still persist with this year's model, mostly having to do with the TV's mandatory soundbar. The reason this TV is so thin, other than the fact that it's OLED and therefore it doesn't have a fat backlight shining through the pixels, is because the TV's drive circuitry, power supply, and I/O are not housed in the main chassis, but are instead contained in this 28-pound Dolby Atmos soundbar. Now, to be clear, it's a pretty awesome soundbar. It's 4.2 channel and 60 watts, so it goes pretty loud and usually manages to sound clear at high volumes, unless you're listening to metal or something. And the way the speakers emerge and then hide when you turn the TV off is really slick, but if you're the type of person who spends $15,000 on a TV, we don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that you probably have a better audio solution than what they're including here. A fact that is demonstrated by the number of wallpaper TV owners who have opted to hide their soundbars under a table or in a wall behind the screen. Wouldn't it be easier, more aesthetic, and even cheaper for everyone involved if LG simply offered a more compact variant that didn't include any speakers at all? I mean, it's the kind of thing that's so obvious that it makes you kind of mad, because it's like, it feels like they're saying, hey, I mean, these high-end clients are already paying so much, what's an extra few $100 to cover the cost of the soundbar? Not to mention the shipping. But even if they do make the soundbar easier to hide, the umbilical cord is still kind of a drag, even though it is relatively discreet and includes an extension. It's just not nearly as flexible as Samsung's OneConnect solution, and it doesn't have the requisite fire rating to be run inside a wall. So depending on your local laws, you might need one of these sold separately in wall cable kits. And finally, what about OLED's arch nemesis? Not being as bright as Quantum Dot and burning. Well, it's still not as bright, but I think we're far past the point where we left off with Plasma, where they were considered only suitable for use in a dimmed room. I personally didn't find that it was an issue with the W8 at all. As for burn-in, while mitigation strategies like screen shift, which moves the whole picture over a few pixels periodically, the automatic screensaver, and the pixel refresher routines that run to help prevent image retention exist, burn-in continues to be an issue on modern OLEDs. One that will especially affect people like gamers, which is kind of why we didn't really mention its awful input lag, and my grandma, who leaves local news and the Weather Channel on 24 hours a day. I mean, I've been using mine for 2 years and I haven't experienced it yet, so there's no doubt in my mind that with proper care, which by the way for me includes nagging my wife and kids to make sure that they have YouTube and Netflix in full screen mode, so I don't end up with a stupid Windows Start icon in the bottom left, LG's 2018 lineup of OLEDs will drop the jaw of pretty much anyone within eyeshot for years to come. Though that doesn't mean that you should necessarily buy this particular one. I mean, if you got $1 billion in the bank, yeah, duh, why not? Buy 9, you know? Buy some Quadro GPUs and run the whole thing as a giant video wall, who cares? It's one of the coolest TVs on the planet. But if I was a more normal person, I would first make sure that I have a secondary display for those extra innings ball games. Then I'd probably look elsewhere in LG's OLED line. In the How Did You Hear About Us section. We're going to have that linked down below. So thanks for watching, guys. If you disliked this video, you can hit that button. But if you liked it, hit like, get subscribed, or maybe consider checking out the product that we featured at the link in the video description. Pick yourself up a W8. Or we should probably link the other OLEDs too, just because those are the ones we think make more sense, right? Also,
so we're huge fans of first-person shooters here on Node, and we saw this game called Zero Caliber. It's a new VR FPS. It's basically like Call of Duty in VR, but it looks like one of the best, most refined, most gorgeous-looking first-person shooters. So we're gonna check it out today. Maybe I'm gonna jump in. Nico, you're a big fan of COD 1, right? And by COD 1, I mean COD 4.
Yeah, I'm a big Modern Warfare guy.
Okay, yeah. We used to play Modern Warfare a lot, and all those hours we put in Modern Warfare should help us in this game. Oh, dude, this armory though. Wow. Hell yeah, this is what I'm talking about. They got Ace Val up in here?
Alright, D, server's up. I'm already in it. It just starts the game the moment you start the server.
What?
I
Okay.
still got my Makarov.
Okay, hold on. I'm just like in awe with this armory.
Alright. So this is basically just Call of Duty VR, right?
Basically.
Are we talking COD Blops? Are we talking MUA? Or are we talking
I think we're talking MUA too.
MUA 2? Okay.
Yeah. Alright, I'm joining in.
Okay.
Hi. Hey Nico, what's
Hey,
up?
dude. Wow, you look so futuristic. Dude, you're just a guy from Doom.
So are you. All I got is my Desert Eagle, the standard issue Desert Eagle.
That's cool. I got this cool block.
Nice, man. Okay, well, they don't know me.
Dude, our guns have physics.
It's true.
Kind of.
they must know me really well by starting me off with this.
Yeah, they also gave me this. Actually, I got this after this. It's got a laser.
Well, let me see your soft mods real quick. All right, very nice, very nice.
Just turn that laser on and
Pretty
off.
ballsy.
Does
running
this
those
get in your
commands.
eyes?
Like, whoa, boy, whoa, not safe. Not safe for work, dude. Come on.
Hey, you want to see a trick? So let's say I'm shooting my gun and I gotta reload really fast. I just go, and I just slam the other
Slam the other one out of existence? That's sick. Wait, can I do that with this?
Oh, you can. I think.
Okay, I did. Yeah, it worked. Hold on. No.
There
Oh,
you
I
go.
hurt my hand. Wait.
It's only my gun and I gotta reload really fast. I just go, and I just slam the other.
Slam the
into
other
it.
one out of existence? That's sick. Wait, can I do that with this?
Oh, you can. I think.
Okay, I did. Yeah, it worked. Hold on. No.
More slam. There
Oh,
you
I
go.
hurt my hand. Wait.
It's only halfway in.
Wait. Oh, here,
I got it
Can
now.
you put it in?
Wait.
Just toss it in the air. Okay. It's
Wait.
cool. I'll load my own mags. It's fine.
Hey, guess what? You want to see a trick? I'm gonna pull a magazine out of your belt, and it's one of mine.
All right. I guess. Wait, are there guns in the back of these trunks?
There's
guns
guns
over
here in these
here.
boxes. Can you see my laser?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool.
All right. What am I? You're running.
Yeah, I ran an M4.
I'll run a different gun then. I'll run MP5.
Oh, wait. Also, it's worth mentioning in this game, you can climb things.
Dude, you're so strong not using your legs at all.
Dude, I'm just full pull-ups.
Just hand. Oh! Wait, can you hold with one arm and then shoot with a gun?
Surprise, mother-
Oh my god, that's so sick.
Wait, how do we reload now? Wait, I know.
You drop your gun. Oh! Don't break your legs!
You can just hold on and just throw yourself up, reload really quick, and then catch yourself. Oh, I'm gonna have to
sick.
try that in
Hold
the
on.
heat of battle.
See that position? We're supposed to advance on it.
I'm just on patrol here. Just
So
regular
our
patrol.
boys are following us, so I guess
Okay.
we're team leader.
Oh, dang, we got baddies
I
right
got
here.
hostiles ahead. It's weird they didn't see us just standing here. Take them down.
Slam my Megan. Oh, shit. That didn't work.
God, your friend just shot you. I'm running over to cover.
If your friend shoots you, he's not really your
Cover
friend.
me.
Oh, these guns have kick. Real guns. I'm moving on this house, D.
All right, we gotta get close. My gun's real close range. I'm on you.
Got a guy in the window. Hold on. Going close quarters.
The guy inside's down. Popping off.
Shit.
I just saw blood. It made you bleed your own blood, dude.
That's no good. This gun's really in my
Oh, wait,
face.
you know what? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm going inside, buddy. I'm going inside.
Okay.
I can't go inside through the window.
Yeah, I'm in.
It won't let me in the window.
Why are you in the
I'm
window?
gonna climb this house. Hold on.
Oh,
Getting to the rooftop.
the house is
Give
empty,
you
dude.
cover.
It's okay. It's all clear.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I just couldn't make it up top.
What's this? Dude, an RSASS?
Wait, you got an RSAS up in there?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Whoa.
This is an RSAS, right? No, this is VSS. No, this is an RSAS.
That's our ASL.
Oh, yeah, it's Val. That's it. So I'm just trying to remember all my Tarkov guns. Are you badass enough to use this Makarov?
No.
I am.
Okay. You want to do pistols only?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's do it.
Do you want my Glock?
No, I got this baby right here.
Okay, I'm gonna use this baby right here. Literally a
Size that gun. Let's go. Dude, this is what I used to do in Modern Warfare. I would just go, oh my god, they've been killing civilians.
Oh my goodness, this kid can use our gun on that. Alright, soldiers. Moved up. Tap, tap. Alright,
Whoa,
let's go.
don't just shoot the wall. These guys are so untrained. Oh my god, he just died.
Moving
Nico,
up on him.
I think we're playing with a bunch of nubs. It's like Cobra, every shot's a kill. No, I'm getting shot with bullets. I need help.
My gun's
Watch
not
out,
working.
Nico.
Alright. I think,
I got
sorry,
you.
I shot you.
There's guys to the right.
Yeah, my Makarov wasn't working anymore. I jammed it or something.
Well, they're real shit guns, so they'll probably break real easy. I gotta pull my MP5 out. No, I need ammo. I just reach for my dick and grab my mags out.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Are you ready?
Yeah, so I'm just madly running through this field.
I don't even know where you are. Sit down! Damn, this desert eagle puts people down though.
I think they're all dead.
All right, I see you. I'm right behind you.
All right, D, let's move up.
Guys on the roof.
He's trying to eagle eye these guys up on the roof, and it's working. It's working. Give him the net.
Oh my God, so much blood just came out.
Give him the bald eagle. Get on his walls here. All right, coming down.
All right, I'm coming to you.
Keep saying my tactics. Whoa! There's terrorists all over the place. Dude, Rocket Freedom's gonna catch up to him.
I'm moving up. They can't handle the speed.
Hold on, I'm gonna clear this place with a grenade.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna put this red dot on my Desert Eagle.
Grenade out. Boom, move.
Nice, moving.
Whoa. Dude, nah, it's
Clear.
That's how I clear. Wait,
Nope.
there's one more guy right there. Now it's clear.
It's clear.
Dude, nice.
Dude, this Desert Eagle with the red dot is kind of all I need in my life.
Yeah, the pistols are pretty much great. This AK's too tiny.
Told you, Nico, it's not about the size. Unless it's like a miniature one. I got contacts on the left. I'm gonna sneak up and get some close range kills.
Sounds good.
I'm moving left with this sick flank. Hold on.
Think of your families.
Oh, so you saved my life. Thank you.
Alright, we gotta save the cities. Oh, I put my gun on semi somehow and it's way better. Dude, laser sights make everything so much easier.
I'm just sniping dudes with the Desert Eagle.
Alright, I'm getting this house key.
All right,
Why are you
moving.
shooting me?
I'm not.
No, sorry, this computer man was.
Man.
John McLeod was shooting me.
All right, this is clear.
Oh, red dot sights. Thank you.
What's over here? Oh, there's a civilian. Hello, civilian.
Dude,
He's talking to me telepathically. I wonder what will happen if I put this barrel in his mouth and pull the trigger.
don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
You don't think I should do it?
Don't.
I still have one in the chamber. You know?
Hold on.
No!
Oh, there's a gunfight happening.
Wait, yeah, there's a gun happening.
Before we go deal with that gunfight, there's very important business I need to do right here, and I need you to witness it.
Hold on, there's a bunch of dudes at this window, but that's really sick. I can't believe that actually works. Holy shit.
Dude, this guy came into the wrong room. Gotta protect my fans, man.
You know what to say? It's all about the fans. Oh my god, this guy's inside, Nico.
Yeah?
Yeah, they came up behind us.
Dang. Can you You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Cool, I'm just
Got
dealing
it.
with
Clear.
these guys on the over this hill. Dude, I told you on Meg just last time. Just single firing. Alright. Shoot guys from far away. I'm gonna shoot guys. I'm close up. Wait, I'm gonna get on this fan. And now none of them can get me. Come on, bad guys. Come in this room, I dare you. There's one.
We're all outside here.
Any second now, he's gonna come in this room. Come on. Don't disappoint the fans. Get out of the way, John McQuad.
Oh my god, I'm getting shot.
Oh, God dang it. No. I'm missing my chances at glory here. Alright, that's enough of this.
I think it's clear.
Definitely not clear. Now it's clear. Alright, guys. Good soldiering. All of you. Each and every one of you. Good soldiering. Alright, let's move out. Yeah, that's right. Silently running. Without any word of warning.
Guys. Whoa! Oh, cover your eyes! Oh, don't look into it!
Is that a nuclear bomb? No, that's too small.
Oh, no, that's just a big ass bomb. This is just one of those regular bombs.
Oh, baddies. Launching grenade. Dude, you're just in the frame, man. You're just getting out there. You don't know fear.
I'm all up in here.
Boom.
A lot of guys over here.
Yeah?
I'm on you. Got your back.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Ouch.
Oh,
Yo,
floating.
hey D, I'm here now. This is me.
Oh, this guy looks just like you. Your twin brother's also here.
Oh, hold on, I got the perfect thing for these guys. Grenades.
Got guys over here.
Oh, yeah.
Checking our six.
Come on, come on. Ah!
Hey. Over here on our side. We're completely surrounded.
It's okay. I'm John Wick over here. That guy's our biggest gun I've ever seen.
Guys are inside our base.
Are there?
Yeah.
Can't stand for that.
I have no sights on my gun, so I'm just gonna have to freaking center action relock this bitch.
Whoa, jeez.
Whoa!
You didn't tell us
Dude,
they were
danger
doing
close,
that.
Jesus Christ.
There's no warning.
We should really... Wow.
We have radios here.
That's insane.
I'm just gonna stay behind this rock. We weren't about to go wrong, we were handling it. I felt alive right there, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
First throw I've had in years.
Wait, so if I build a gun and hold it while I start the mission, will I start with it?
I think so.
Whoa, shit. I'm gonna go build my drone.
Whoa, everybody's here now. We found this all.
G36. G36, pretty cool.
Some cool sniper
How
rifle.
do I-
Speedy 0114,
This is so
hello.
hard.
How much money do I have? Oh, I have 22.
Hello. A little bit of a mess right now, but trying to clean up my computer.
Alright, what kind of sight do I have? Telegraphic kind of guy.
Oh, this revolver is great.
I finished the tutorial. Hey you guys, you didn't get too far ahead without me, did you?
Definitely not, Brandon.
Definitely not.
A few driver issues with getting recorder working and all sorts of shit. But I'm through it now. It looks like you guys are in between missions. Are you doing one more?
We are in
Yeah, we'll do one more.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna join you
Oh,
guys. for this
G36
one.
Texas.
I'm gonna take this red dot on. Whatever. I'll keep the red dot on.
Flash compensator.
That's pressed on it. Let's get one of these foregrips.
Oh boys, they let me bring this gun to the office. That's
Yeah, it's
pretty
weird.
great.
They just let you bring the guns in the office.
That's not allowed anymore. Is it? What is this? Is this 1988 or something? I can just shoot up the office? No one seems worried about it?
Hello.
We're in the army. It's fine. He's fine.
Oh, yes.
What?
Dude, this gun.
Bring your gun to office.
I like
day.
this.
This gun is so sick.
Me like your gun parts, man.
Dude, me like these gun parts.
This G36 is so smooth. Just like real life.
You can't put it sight on the Glock. Sick.
Oh, you
Okay.
can't put the... Oh, yes you can. All right. You're at business.
Whoa, this gun is so cool. God damn, this gun's good looking.
That's me.
wires. Almost everywhere.
Guess what? A new update for Gorn came out where you can play asymmetrical multiplayer, but you have to get custom game mode unlocked, and the only way to do that is defeat all the champions in the game. So I got 3 pros here with me, and we're ready to kill some champions.
Did they change the graphics a little bit?
Yep.
Yeah, they're better. All right, good luck, Nico. All right, the rule is if you die twice, you're out.
Okay.
All right?
I'm not worried about this guy. Look at him, he's hitting himself.
He looks like a
Look at those dance
He's
moves.
just slapping his own arms with his chest. Remember, Nico, you have 1 free life.
Oh man, it's getting muted. It's getting muted up there.
Oh, I'm like, I got fuzzy vision. It's not. Oh, what's this? Why am I going to sleep?
You died from concussion.
Flat out, dude. All right, one more life
Your
for
brain,
Nico.
your brain hemorrhaged.
Boy, Nico's an arrogant. No respect.
Then no respect. Don't call. No respect. I think you already beat this guy.
I think you're in the wrong place to go.
Oh my god.
Oh, I got a rock.
They give you a rock for your trouble. Oh, this is the guy. Wait, we're like, this doesn't seem like the right. He broke his toe, dude.
This is the champion for sure.
Yeah, but don't you go through the door?
Keep softening that leg up.
You go through the door to the arena.
I think you're supposed to.
Soften him up real
Aim
good.
for that right leg.
Wow, I'll get to work, guys.
He's deceivingly.
Oh yeah.
Oh, he's bleeding.
Keep waking him up.
He's scared of me
dude.
now.
You're gonna get him. Oh. Okay, you got one.
Oh, he's angry
go,
now.
Go get his other arm. Go get his other.
That's it. Swap.
Nice.
That's pretty cool.
All right.
Haha. Haha. I'm your champion.
So Nico, you need to go to the arena.
Oh, okay.
You just gotta beat this game.
You just got to arena out.
You guys gotta beat this game? I can do that.
There's a lot of content in this game. That's cool. Dude, Donatello over here.
Oh no!
Oh boy.
That almost went terrible.
I think he's dead now.
The most awkward
You're
way
like
to spear a guy.
warbling on this. Fine. Oh yeah.
What I just put in.
Watch out, it's a 1-hit kill on that axe. That axe is a single.
You need
Oh,
something
there you
that's
go.
gonna break his armor, dude.
Oh no.
Oh, that was almost that. Dude, it's so close to getting you.
I think
You're
Nico's,
so close so many times. I can't believe
There
you're
we
still
go.
alive. Oh my god.
Okay, he didn't like that. He's
Look at
leaking.
the other guy's just hanging out.
I love this other guy's just respecting the fight that's going on. He's just like, just watch it, right?
Oh man. These blocks though. Wow, he swings fast.
Oh, what happened?
Right in his sweet spot.
His armpit was his weak spot.
Getting stabbed right in that pit would be so terrible.
That was anticlimactic for that guy.
I like how it goes slow-mo so you know.
That's good. Too easy.
Oh, there's an elbow
cheap
block.
shot.
He's so lucky.
Whoa, he's got lunge.
This guy's got a spear too.
I was wiggle the spear in his spine a little bit.
Dude, you have to poke him.
Oh my goodness.
Show me a weapon that looks awesome when you kill someone.
Okay, what was this one?
Not wiggly.
Yeah, that spear is jank.
Oh, nice. You chuck these guys out.
His eyeballs came out.
Oh, nice block.
Yes!
Oh,
Dude, show me that guy.
show me his face.
Darcy. That guy was jacked up, dude.
All right,
His
one more.
eyeballs came out.
His eyeballs didn't come out. Uh-oh.
All right, here we
You got
go.
this, Nico.
Just punch through his shield. Duck his nunchuck.
You. Come here, you.
I'm gonna get out of the way. So you can throw guys into the other guys too now and then do damage. Nice. Oh, just beat him with the head of another man.
Oh boy. That's brutal, man.
Helicopter attack.
Dude,
Was this game like too hard for people or something? They made it easier?
Yeah, I guess so.
It says Nico fighting. I mean, those guys literally, the two of them had a shield and one guy had one nunchuck.
Yeah.
Destroyed.
Dude, double shield technique.
Nice. They're feeling so daunted by you right now.
I don't know those axes.
Dude, I like your always advancing strategy. You're like always moving forward.
Dude, these shields are nuts.
What happened?
You hit a button.
I think you crashed it.
Yeah, you smacked your buttons right when you weird sounding button smack. The game froze.
Yeah.
So does that count as a death? I think it does.
Last time I was sick, so I didn't get to get in here. So this is my first go at release Gorn.
Gorn 2, the finished Gorn.
You took one hit. You took one hit. Careful. Whoa.
Oh, Brandon, you're way too good at this. You're never gonna die.
All right, here they come.
Oh shit, there's a big boy back there.
Oh,
that
that
was awesome.
smiling. He's
That was a
the
perfect
longest one.
anime slice.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
Something crazy happened there. No one ever knows what happened though.
Oh, good block.
Whoa! Brandon juggled him.
Chop his legs out, Brandon.
Oh my goodness.
He just disappeared.
Oh, you're back! You son of a bitch!
You take his knees out. Remember, you get one hit. Oh, that was a double kill with once. Oh no, it's still
Not
alive.
quite. I need a shield too.
Wait, is the guy you're holding talking?
You did it.
That killed him, man.
You killed him with a broken heart.
I think his insanity meter filled up. That's why.
I just wanted to do this the whole time. So I keep seeing you guys play, and I never see you play with your food enough. I wanted to make like a little human centipede out of these boys. Oh, you're the tail of the centipede. Sorry guys,
Oh my God, so rough. It's so brutal.
All right, he's ready to be installed. Just gonna make a little hole back here. Okay. And then just pretend I'm sewing it up a little bit.
But the guy in the front doesn't have a mouth to eat.
You're right. Fuck
Is there a headline somewhere?
It's good enough. That's my human.
I think
That's
it
the human
works.
centipede. It works, right?
It's the buffest centipede I've ever seen.
Dude, judge it. Judge it. You like it?
I think he digs
They
it.
love it. Boom.
Oh, you keep,
That's my
keep
level.
going.
You know, I keep asking.
haven't
We'll just do
died.
one level each.
Yeah, let's do one level each. Screw it. I don't care. I love this game.
Like
So these guys are just asking for it.
Man, just getting a guy an arrow, a bow and arrow, in an arena fight like this is like so unfair.
Although you know if the guy catches him, they're gonna kill him real good.
Yeah. You hit the menu button toggles.
I guess, yeah, I didn't realize it was on toggle mode.
Hit the menu button to toggle grip.
Which one is that? The bottom one? No.
Top.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, he was just about to punch
He
you.
was so cocky back there.
Oh,
Oh,
Gushers of blood.
nice, Sam.
Fuck. Toggle mode. Shit. Sorry.
behind you. Watch out behind you.
God damn it. This doesn't count. Toggle. What the fuck is this toggle mode shit?
It's simple. It just toggles
Yeah, I
your
know,
grip.
but like I didn't know it was
Just
there.
fight through. You can
You're
win
still
this.
good. You're
Just
still
do it.
good. You're still alive. We'll give you a moment to redeem yourself.
Keep back it up. Yeah, keep only one at a time.
Crush them. Oh,
Nice.
just take the helmets off and take the brains out.
You gotta kill him before you die. You gotta kill him before you die. You gotta kill him before you die.
Oh wait! Oh wait! You came back to life! Yes! Wait! Wait, I think that's very cool. If you get a kill during your
When you're
death,
blurry-eyed.
yeah, you get to come back alive.
Grab a weapon.
Oh fuck. Well, damn. Sorry. It's
There's
been
a rock
a
to your
while.
left.
It's been a
There's a
while.
rock to your left.
Well,
Dude, none of them wearing helmets. This is a perfect
Look at the
rock
hammer.
Oh,
That
the hammer.
Oh,
Yeah.
baby.
this isn't toggle though.
If you click the menu button, it'll click your hand permanently shut.
I don't like that. Fuck that.
Yeah, just use the triggers.
Yeah, I like to hold.
Biggest hammer.
Nice.
Yes. I'll do some destruction. Oh!
That guy bounced.
Oh, dude, this is sick. Dun, 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 dun.
Yo, let's see a cinematic shot of his body after you hit him.
Let me see him fly out that ring.
Run.
Don't worry, more people will come. Plenty of hammer fodder. Oh, that was sick. Knock him out of the ring. Oh my god.
He's not dead yet.
He's still alive somehow.
Oh, you knocked all his clothes off.
You did it. You hit the freaking goal.
Wow. I was not expecting such a perfect finishing move.
Yo, that hammer is the truth.
That's the best weapon in the game.
It is.
Hey, I'm done.
Yeah, watch left, watch left.
Don't finish me, please. I'm gonna deliver.
1, 2, 3,
yes,
4,
man.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Oh, yes, you're a fucking god.
One out of 3. All right, so I gotta win 2 more, and then we can do this. Whoa, whoa, whoa! What? I didn't get a choice.
Why did they take your weapons away?
Look up.
Ridiculous.
Intrepid, I believe. Mary and I did a little run today. She seems crazy to me because she has a big run tomorrow. She says that's what you do for marathons. And then she left, go clean up. I sit back here, did some lunges. Better every day. And some of you may remember these pants. If you remember where I got these pants, you win a virtual high five. They're symbolic for marathons, and I'm trying to give you some more hints. Who knows where I got these pants? Comment below.
Note to self, don't pet raccoons in Central Park. Got it.
So that's what a distemper raccoon looks like. Don't want to get near them. Nope. Those raccoons will be all over us with their distemper. Oh gosh, they're coming. They're coming. Hey, did you know this tree is camouflage? I thought it looked kind of cool. We need more camo trees in Texas. Mayor, I think it's kind of weird that you run before your race. Explain yourself.
I don't know. We sat on a plane all day, or not all day, but for a good chunk of time yesterday.
So you just need to loosen up?
Yeah.
Stretch out the legs? But you don't think that was going to make you a little more tired?
Blood flowing.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. You're definitely right.
Running 26 miles, running an easy 3 big 4 is not.
Easy 3? We ran like at a 9-something pace, okay? Crazy. But I did a bunch of lunges, so I work out way harder. Also, I stepped in a huge puddle. My socks were completely dry the whole time, and then I stepped in a puddle when I was walking, looking at the USS Intrepid. Here at the finish line. They're just, you know, checking it out. 21 hours, 6 minutes. How do you feel?
So excited right now.
Are you really excited? You're not nervous?
No, because like I don't have any expectations.
It doesn't matter now, huh?
Need to finish, and this is important.
This is definitely more epic than any finish line you've ever run across. This is the biggest marathon in the world, right?
I think so, yeah.
And how much money have you raised?
93,000.
link at the top of the description in case anyone wants to raise money for Mayor's St. Jude's fundraiser thing.
And we also still have the St. Jude support t-shirts and sweatshirts available, so you can go and buy those too. And
But if you want to donate like $7,000, just go donate it straight to St. Jude's.
Yes.
On Meredith's.
$7,000.
We get nothing from this, by the way. It all goes to St. Jude's. So go check it out. We're really trying to get to 6 figures. It would be so cool. I look awesome. It got really cold and windy all of a sudden. We're on the hunt right now to find Mayor breakfast for the morning. She's gonna eat a bagel. Is that it? Just carbs, basically, for your run. I kind of messed up on mine. I ate eggs and oatmeal. Listen.
Oatmeal is good.
Hear how loud that is? I don't know if you hear that tone playing. It's like a cruise ship that's playing some super loud tone across the whole city. Oatmeal's good, but I ate eggs and milk. I also drank a full cup of milk before my marathon. It wasn't a marathon, but it was close. I also took like 7 pounds of protein to eat on the run, which was apparently a mistake. Really all you need on a run is carbs. Like, protein doesn't do anything for the race. So I realized that later. I actually researched it after my race. I was like, oh, that was stupid. Mary told me I didn't need that, but I thought, nah, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I need protein. Wrong. No bagels in there. I'm sure you can find some bagels here somewhere. Mary just reminded me that I had considered bringing our kids on this trip. I'm glad we don't have them. Like, I miss them, but like, it would be... It'd be crazy in New York with kids, little kids. Yeah, a lot of kids are raised here, obviously, and man, that'd be stressful. There's just cars everywhere. You gotta like jump out of the way of cars. And I'm being a little overdramatic, but
We've taken a bunch of taxis and Ubers and stuff. Like, you can't do that with 3 little kids.
yeah, how do you move kids?
I don't know.
Uber XL everywhere.
But you have to have car seats.
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. Some time has passed. We just had dinner, and now Meredith and I are going to venture into the subway system in New York City. Well, here we are. Here's the other problem. How do we know where to get off? How do we know where we are? There are no signs in here. Don't know where we're going. I don't know. We're underground somewhere.
Film the poor guy.
We could be getting deeper in the ground. I don't know where we're going right now, Mayor. Dave, what stop is this? How do you know where to get off? I don't know what's going on. Meredith, this one? This one?
I don't think so.
I feel like we should get off at this one. No one else is freaking out about it. My friends are doing the no hands challenge. This guy and this guy. No hands. These 2 girls, no hands, and also that little boy over there. You almost lost. Almost lost. You're about to. Wait for it. Oh, good job. Good job, guys. Way to go. What's up, dude? Yeah.
Hey, hang on.
Do you want to be in the video?
Sure.
You're in it, dude.
David.
Shout out somebody. Shout out. You didn't shout at anybody.
Who's your best friend?
Oh, Christian Tapia.
I love him. He sounds awesome. Are you in our challenge? The no.
You shot titanium with a 50 caliber.
Yep, that was a good one, right? You are the first person in New York to notice me.
When I first saw you, I thought you were Demo Ranch, and I was telling my mom about you, and then I realized it was you.
Yep. I get noticed in Texas everywhere. New York, not so much.
I want to go with the Marines when I grow up.
Good for you, dude. You should do it. Bye. Nice to meet you. You're the man. You ready? Are y'all sure this isn't our stop? This seems like it might be our stop.
I think at least one more. Yeah, okay. Next one I'm saying something. Maybe.
That we should get off? I don't know. Whoa, good call. Steven's like a rock over here. Meredith, look at you. We did it. We survived. Good job, Mayor. Proud of you for making it to that subway. Times Square. So we were actually thinking maybe we should have like a meetup in Times Square, maybe tomorrow or the next day. What do you guys think about that?
Can you guys hear this?
I thought it was loud last night.
You have to go to sleep right now. It is 9:30. Meredith has to get up at 4. And so that's a good amount of sleep. That's 7 hours.
We have the
Oh, you have tons of time to sleep then. Why are we going to bed right now? You know what?
Party some.
Okay. Are you in? Me neither. I'm actually really tired. But good luck going to sleep right now. I'm probably going to play on my phone for several hours.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Actually, I do need to edit a video. So tomorrow is Mare's Big Run. What time are you aiming for? I'm going to go ahead and make you. I'm going to hold you to it.
No, I'm not.
You're not going to say any time?
No.
4:40?
Let's hope not.
Then what time? Are you trying to beat your old record? Trying to be under 5 hours?
Yeah.
So it's between 4:08 and 5 hours. 4:28? Good luck wishes. You could see this video like right now, but you know, there's the editing and then the going to sleep part that always slows everything down. But yeah, just pretend like this is happening. As soon as you see it, that's our day. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for watching Off the Ranch. Wish this girl good luck. She doesn't need it, but she appreciates it. We love you. We'll see you next time.
Hey, what camera is that number? Shut up! Don't tell Mare.
Oh.
Hey, what camera is that number?
Oh.
Hey, what camera is that number? Shut up! Don't tell Mare.
Dungeons & Dragons got its own cartoon show in 1983. Now, this is a bit before my time, but I do distinctly recall catching reruns of this probably like 10 years later or something like that. I don't remember a whole lot from that, but let me tell you, now that I've started watching it again, it sure is. something? Maybe they were playing it and suddenly it became their characters. The opening also shows us exactly what the party makeup is.
Fear not, ranger, barbarian, magician, thief, cavalier, and acrobat.
Well, we've already got a thief, so maybe you could balance the party out by being a cleric, or maybe a druid, or something like a monk could be cool. Wait! Acrobat! That's the best class!
Who was that? That was Venger, the force of evil. I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Throwing away my D&D books? Clearly, I don't need them. As the intro to this cartoon has taught me everything I need to know about Dungeons and Dragons. Every episode has the kids pursuing one goal: to escape this fantasy realm and return to the real world, which is probably the most unbelievable aspect of this entire cartoon show. I want to live here. The party consists of Sheila the Thief, who has a magic cloak of invisibility. Though she doesn't get many opportunities to turn invisible, nor does she steal things very often to make her seem useful. Still, she's level-headed and is quick to point out possible flaws in their plans. Presto is the party's magician, who must have took the conjuration school specialization since all he ever does is pull crap out of his magic hat. And he pretty much always screws it up, making him close to worthless. The youngest member is Bobby the Barbarian. He has a magic club of indistinct powers, presumably strength enhancements? All he ever does with it is knock stuff over or hit the ground to make things fall. Also, I want to point out how much I hate the fact that this kid is far more ripped than I will ever be. He is 8. Even the rest of the party makes fun of him.
We can't go anywhere until I get the rocks out of my shoe.
Keep them. Maybe the rocks in your head need company, Eric.
Also, he's racist.
How many dwarves does it take to change the light bulb? None! They can't reach it! They're not troll enough!
Finally, there's Hank the Ranger. He's clearly the only person who's played D&D before because he's kind of a badass. He has a bow that shoots energy arrows, saves the party frequently, and is the only person who can basically fight. He's rad. Come to think of it, among all of them, they have exactly one weapon, and it shoots laser beams. This is one of those cartoons where every battle is laser beams or things being knocked over to fall on enemies. The rare times a sword does appear, it never cuts, only shoots more laser beams. Fun fact, this is what's considered to be the most violent cartoon show on television. Probably because of how badly it butchers the source material. Oh yeah, they also have a unicorn named Uni, because every kid's show needs a pet animal of some sort. The big bad guy of the series is an evil dude named Venger. He can achieve ultimate power if he's able to obtain all 6 magical items of the party. And check this out, he's voiced by Optimus Prime.
You have invaded the Castle Avenger. Autobots, transform and roll out!
It's hard to call this guy intimidating, since anytime he shoots some magic, it has the same cartoon sound effects of a fat guy getting stuck in a tube. Also frequently showing up is Dungeon Master. Not the Dungeon Master, his name is Dungeon Master. He'll appear before the party to set them up for this episode's adventure, giving a bit of backstory and always leaves them off with a riddle to solve, which is actually pretty neat. The riddle always ends up being integral to the plot, and figuring it out alongside the party, well, half of them, makes it fun to watch. I can't tell if he's the nicest DM ever, literally handing them everything they need.
Lose this, was it?
cave, so thankfully there isn't a TPK in the first session. Dungeon Master tells him to seek the Great Wizard Merlin because the DM couldn't be bothered to come up with an original name for help getting home. Things were going okay until frickin' Tiamat again! It's like Dungeon Master is saying, "You're gonna fight this, damn it! I put a lot of work into this encounter!" Well, color me impressed though. They managed to fight off Tiamat long enough to set up a trap for her. The entire party used teamwork. Wonder what that's like. Presto works on a magic spell for Merlin, but then tries to do another one to open a portal home. Instead, it unleashes a horde of dragons on the nearby town where the rest of the party is celebrating at. Turns out, Merlin is actually a polymorph Venger who tricked Presto into undoing the real Merlin's protection spell. You know, I gotta admit, that's a pretty good plot twist. I could personally see myself doing that in a session if I was a dungeon master. Everyone at the town quickly mounts up on horses to return to Merlin's castle. Whoa. They just showed Sheila's underwear. Did they think we wouldn't notice? I noticed. You noticed. The castle realized there's no way for them to fight off Venger because they're still trying to figure out how far it works. The only thing that could fight him off is something just as powerful, Tiamat. They let her loose so that they fight each other. This forces Venger to retreat while they recast the protection spell. Again, this is kind of cool. It's a clever way for the party to solve one of their problems, and this episode so far has been really good at giving each character kind of a moment to shine. So far, a great start for the series. My main complaint about the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon is that it's not very Dungeons and Dragons-y. You'll often see some familiar monsters, dragons, manticores, bullywugs, and even a beholder in the second episode, which apparently the beholder's main weakness is the beauty of a flower, which makes him deflate like a balloon. You think there are more iconic NPCs or locations and the like. There is Tiamat, yes, and in one episode,
your bodies I leave to Lolth, demon queen of spiders.
Lolth? And before Drizzt shows up and edgelords his way out of this one. Also, I remember Lolth looking a little more different. That's kind of it. They don't even use iconic D&D magic spells, which I feel like would be the easiest thing to incorporate. It teeters on the edge of being a generic fantasy cartoon, but there's just enough there to remind you that this is Dungeons and Dragons.
I can't believe this!
Pretty relatable. Of the first 9...
I can't believe this! We're fighting snails!
Yeah, and losing.
Alright, that's pretty relatable. Of the first 9 episodes, they're all pretty good, to be honest. One of my favorite episodes was one where each member needs to fight their own worst fear. It allowed for some decent character development for them. Hank fears not being a leader. Sheila has monophobia, hates being alone. Eric sucks. Presto fears being blind and loses his glasses. Bobby and Diana fear being too young and old respectively, and did I just see a boob? That was some straight up titty nipple! Between this and Sheila's underwear, and there was definitely a part where Hank got a handful of Diana's butt, I didn't realize that this campaign was going to be using so much material from the Book of Erotic Fantasy. Do not look that up. It's not my favorite cartoon show ever. I wouldn't exactly call it D&D in it. That's why my final rating for this show is a deflated beholder out of 10. It sure looks like Dungeons & Dragons, but you quickly realize how little essence there is on the inside. I like seeing all the D&D monsters, and the adventures themselves sure do invoke that feeling of playing in a real D&D session. I think I'd be less annoyed if more than just half the party was any good, or if they could have more attacks than just the bow. But I like the vast array of locales they travel to, and Dungeon Master's riddles are pretty neat. Even if it's a bit simple, there are moments of character development, intrigue, or moral quandaries that they go through. It's certainly not my first choice of cartoon to go back and watch, but it has more good going for it than bad. The show ran for 3 seasons and had 27 episodes. Sadly, a proper finale was never made, even though they had the script for it written. I don't really see how this was considered to be the most violent cartoon show on television at the time. Everything that I saw was pretty tame and— oh my god! His face is melting off!
One of the joys of the past decade's indie boom is the increase in the amount of games that are able to strip away the bells and whistles of modern game design, focusing instead on a core gameplay experience with simple, thoughtful design centered around 1 or 2 strong ideas. This is especially true for Limbo, the physics-driven silhouette-based puzzle platformer released by Playdead Studios way back in 2010, with the visual palette based entirely on the interplay between darkness and light, and gameplay that boils down to jumping, grabbing, and pushing stuff. Limbo feels like one of the true poster children for modern indie games. We'll see if it earned its status when I complete Limbo.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Completionist. We are deep into the month of October now, which means it's almost the end of spooky season. And with lots of different ways to get freaked out all month long, I thought we could get creeped out in a more mellow, artful way with Limbo. Especially in these scary times, we all need a break from the real world, which is why I am diving headfirst into this dark and ambiguous tale about a lonely boy lost in a hostile and confusing world where nothing makes sense and everything wants to kill him. No parallels to the real world of any kind at all. Just good old-fashioned escapism. With that said, let's complete Limbo. Yes!
While indie games can be as varied and unique as snowflakes, there's no end to the indie titles that have attempted to bring their own artistic style to one of gaming's most tried and true genres, the platform. Moving a 2-dimensional character over platforms and past enemies, usually while collecting something shiny, is a pastime as old as gaming itself. Which is why it makes sense that as indie developers embraced the freedom that a small development team could bring, the platformer has presented itself as the perfect blank canvas for cool and weird indie games. Playdead Studios decided to take a spooky minimalistic approach with Limbo, which took about 6 years to make from conception to release. And if you've ever been pregnant, which I admit I have not, then the phrase 6 years from conception to release is terrifying enough all on its own. Limbo went through plenty of changes during development, as its development team grew from 2 to 16, but the core visual style was in place from the very beginning. Limbo was always going to be a monochromatic platformer with a heavy emphasis on trial and error, simple but challenging puzzles, and a loose abstract story. I don't want to keep comparing this game to my life, but loose abstract story with a heavy emphasis on trial and error is depressingly accurate. And other people connected to Limbo too, with great reviews and a spot secured in the modern indie game pantheon. Initially exclusive to the Xbox 360, Limbo gradually made its way to Steam and PS3, plus later releases on Xbox One and PS4 marketplaces. It's that PS4 version that I'll be completing today, which was also recently released as a part of a package deal with Playdead's follow-up, Inside. In keeping with the minimalist approach, Limbo looks to be a pretty short, succinct, complete experience. There's only 1 or 2 small roadblocks between me and whatever comes after Limbo. Is it heaven? Hell? Like the way that I've been living? Who can really say? But before facing eternal judgment or whatever, I've got to explore every inch of Limbo. The first thing I'll have have to do is play through the story, which is broken up into about 40 teeny tiny little chapters that can be jumped to once they've been completed. Like in most platformers, completing the story means moving to the right until I can't move to the right anymore, solving puzzles or moving obstacles along the way. Next up, I'll have to find all of the glowing insect eggs, Limbo's only real collectible. Each of these eggs also unlocks an achievement, and they are hidden in some fairly tricky and devious spots throughout the game. I'm gonna track them down and squish them all, because I love completing things almost as much as I hate bugs. So I'll be killing 2 birds with 1 stone, or 2 unborn insects with 1, foot. Once I prevented the birth of a whole insect generation, there's only one thing left to do: completing the game's 2 non-egg related achievements, which are definitely the biggest challenge that Limbo has to offer. One of them requires the completion of a tricky secret area where you have to depend almost entirely on sound, and the other necessitates the completion of the entire game with less than 5 deaths and in 1 sitting. While I'm not too worried about the secret last level, that last trophy has me worried quite a bit, just because so much of Limbo is built around dying over and over while figuring out what you did wrong. So, needless to say, my first trophy is unlikely to fall under that 5 death limit. Both with a bit of practice on some of the harder puzzles and the familiarity built up playing through the game the first time through, it should be well within my reach. All it requires is recklessly throwing myself at a problem over and over again until a solution presents itself. Fortunately, this part has absolutely no parallels to my real life, and is in no way at all too real or an accurate reflection of my day-to-day struggle in this cruel and meaningless world.
Hey man, are you okay?
What? Yeah, I'm fine. Why?
No reason.
Limbo does away with everything with light, shadow, and ambient sound to create a vibe that's minimalist, but also pretty damn immersive. Sometimes that minimalism came off to me as laziness, like the game's almost total lack of interest in telling a story, but I think it's mostly worth it to contribute to the spooky, surreal experience of being lost in Limbo. Limbo places players in the shoes of a delicate little shadow baby known only as the Boy, on a quest through the wilds of Limbo to find his sister. And as far as the plot goes, that's it. There are some hints at a larger world, with glimpses of other people and an abandoned cityscape that implies more to this black and white reality. But the game leaves it up to the players to infer what they want from those little tidbits of world building. When Limbo came out, there was some debate between those who wanted a bit more of a fleshed out story and those who were typically content to formulate their own theories. And while I have no problem with a game that wants its audience to fill in some of the gaps, the story in Limbo is made up almost entirely of gaps. It's Gap City over here, y'all. I'm not saying I needed a traditional plot from Limbo, but a little bit more of an emotional arc would have been nice. It's something these stripped down arts games usually excel at, but Limbo chooses to focus on atmosphere instead. It isn't helped by the fact that almost all of the scripted events, including one featuring a big old spider that will haunt my dreams until the end of my days, takes place in the game's first half. Once the freaky spider-infested forest gives way to an empty cityscape of industrial decay, it feels like some of the air has been let out of the Boy's journey. That loneliness fits with the sad, spooky tone that Limbo is going for. But what makes the first half so much more successful is that it balances that sad, silhouetted shadowscape with some genuine tension and menace. Or maybe that's just the first half's much higher spider quotient. I really hate spiders, you guys. Spider-Man? Great. Spider-Ted? Yeah, why not? Spider anything else? Nah, get out, get out. There's still plenty of unease to be found in the game's animations and environments. The physics in Limbo are great, and that extends to the death animations, where our beautiful little Shadow Boy gets squished, stabbed, and sliced by a variety of nasty hazards. And if you think I'm being sensitive, take it from Sandman to the Three Master Gamers.
I think it is an interesting game and has some gruesome moments.
There's something about watching a little kid get impaled by a spider that's deeply upsetting, even in silhouette, and the bodies littering the floor in the early part of the game act as a threat that the game isn't afraid to carry through with. Obviously, there's very little detail given the nature of the game's design, but Playdead does a great job of fitting things in around the shadowy edges of the world. From the Boy's creepy pinprick eyes to weeds and jagged pops bursting forth from the ground. It's a great example of doing a lot with a little, like killing 30 birds with 1 stone, or making a living out of being good at video games. Not that I'm thinking of anyone specific specific, I swear. Limbo Soundscape also does a lot with nothing at all, eschewing anything resembling a traditional soundtrack. It all comes from sounds within the world, and it does a great job of making you feel alone in a vast and hostile landscape, especially as natural sounds like the running of water and the buzzing of insects gives way to the whirring of saws and clanking of steel. The game's secret unlockable area even forces you to use sounds to navigate obstacles, which would never work if the sound design wasn't on point. The sound in Limbo almost never calls attention to itself, but plays a major role in sucking players into its world of spiders and shadows. There's no real interface or menus of any kind, which feels right. You don't really need any, and they'd only interrupt the experience anyway. Overall, every design element drops you squarely in a boy's tiny little shadowy shoes. A total lack of menu or any kind of instructions, the ominous sights and sounds of a hostile alien landscape, and even the lack of a traditional story to tell you what you're supposed to be feeling. Just like in my... You know what? Nope, never mind.
Were you about to compare it to your real life?
Maybe. Can I get a hug?
Oh, come here, baby.
Simplicity continues to be the rule of thumb in Limbo's gameplay, resulting in a puzzle platformer where the focus gets to remain solidly on the puzzles and the platforms, and a completion experience that's pretty quick, straightforward, and enjoyable throughout. The only things you can do in Limbo are walk, jump, and grab stuff, which are all the abilities I've ever needed so far in the real world, and they're all I ever needed in Limbo 2. While there are some fancy new mechanics late in the game, like using switches to affect gravity, almost everything else can be accomplished by pushing stuff around and grabbing ledges. It wouldn't work without thoughtful level design, and Limbo repeatedly pulls off this neat trick where an obstacle feels impossible, until you really look around and notice every aspect of your surroundings. Everything is placed to reward players who are paying attention, and it feels great to finally figure out what this shadowy world is asking of you. Can't get past that spider? It's probably got something to do with that bear trap you saw earlier. Can't reach that ladder? Maybe you can trick that flying bug you saw into helping you. The art style sometimes hides what you're looking for, but also clears away all the clutter until the only option left is the correct one. On a first playthrough of Limbo, death is not only a regular occurrence, but how you learn to navigate each of Limbo's puzzles. This means that there are no real consequences to dying other than watching the boys gruesome murder over and over again. But if you can handle that, then you're encouraged to try any and all ideas, even if they get you squished, shot, or stabbed. While Limbo doesn't have enemies in the traditional sense, there are a few malevolent forces out there to get you in the game's first half, like the giant spider, some automatic machine gun sentries, and even a couple of random villagers with spears. Rather than having to defeat these enemies though, they're all just living obstacles in the game's cornucopia of creepy puzzles. And make no mistake, Limbo is at its core a puzzle game. The platforming elements require timing and such, but it's really all about figuring out what each area is asking you, and then executing that maneuver with all of the skill and dexterity that our delicate little shadow boy can muster. The boy's limited maneuverability makes a lot of the puzzles all about working within the game's physics, and it feels truly dangerous during the game's first half. There are even brain slugs that limit you to moving in only one direction, which I guess isn't actually that bad compared to what you normally expect from goddamn brain slugs. But once you're in the industrial portion though, the puzzles get a lot more, puzzle-esque, with switches, elevators, and electrified floors. Some people might prefer these more straightforward brain benders, but it's all gonna come down to how much of a puzzle person you are. Same goes for the hiding spots for the insect eggs, which vary from pretty obvious to tricky as hell. But the limited number of eggs in the game keeps them from being a frustration. It's no big chore to find those eggs, squish them, and keep any more frickin' spiders from entering this earth. The last thing we need is more spiders, which brings us to the trophies, most of which unlock as you break all the bug eggs. But it still leaves the secret area and the thankless task of doing a one-sitting run with 5 deaths or less. Now, the secret underground area is hard, given that most of it is totally in the dark. But I got through it with the same gumption and resolve that got me through the rest of the game, and that's a lot of deaths, but mostly gumption. And I didn't have the benefit of trial and error on the Deathless run, which still had a couple of deaths, but Deathlight runs just don't have the same ring to it. I made sure to practice the last few harder puzzles before my attempts, just because I didn't want my perfect run to get tanked at the very end by some particularly unforgiving buzzsaws. But I only ended up having to start over once or twice, due to my own overconfidence. It's actually kind of neat how the game encourages experimentation most of the time, only to demand that you be careful as hell if you want that last trophy. All in all, there's a reason that Limbo is considered a modern indie darling. It's a quick experience without being insanely easy, beautiful without ever having to resort to a single color beyond black and white, and artful without sacrificing solid puzzle-based gameplay. It's even got me feeling a little bit better about my life. Maybe that's just because I've been hugging Brett this whole time.
This isn't weird, right?
The secret challenge zone you get for breaking all of the trophy eggs. That's fine though, because it honestly would have felt weird if there had been a whole bunch of unlockable nonsense. It's just really not that kind of game. Same goes for the lack of a 100% bonus. You can jump between chapters once you're done if you're in love with a specific puzzle, but it's not like you're suddenly going to unlock a lightsaber or whatever. Although honestly, I'd be down with that. But even without a lightsaber, Limbo was mostly a pretty chill and quick completion experience. That run with 5 deaths or less made me a bit nervous, but didn't end up breaking my brain too much. If I had had the misfortune to die a bunch right before the finish line, I might be singing a different tune. But fortunately, the gods of Limbo smiled upon me on this day. While I completed Limbo, there were 48 deaths, 39 chapters completed, 11 insect eggs squashed, 13 total trophies unlocked, 6.5 total hours of playtime, and 2 beautiful Brett shoulders for me to lean on when life and Limbo start to blur together. Limbo's a creepy but breezy experience that can be blown through in a day, insect eggs and all. The only real sticking point is that last achievement, which is a great challenge if you just need more of the boy's creepy pinprick eyes in your life. It's a fun new way to approach Limbo's puzzle-filled world, but doesn't feel congruous with the casual experimentation that distinguishes the rest of the game.
So it looks like I've made my way through Limbo and found myself in a new wonderful place that looks a lot like my office, but I'm still glad I decided to give in to October's spooky vibes by playing through Limbo, which is quick and short enough to make it worth doing everything, including that run where you have to beat the game with 5 or less. Not that bad. It's definitely a challenge, but it may be worth it for some of you out there. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completion rating of completed. That's all time here for today, guys. So please, as always, let me know you about today's episode somewhere on the internet. If you like the show, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, stay up to date, hit that bell, hit all notifications. We have videos on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And hey, we did an awesome fun brand new Nintendo and Bandai Namco last week on Dark Souls. So give that a click or tap right here. Guys, I've been Rob Completionist. I'll see you next week for a brand new episode. Bye.
Public opinion on modern Sonic games are usually pretty black and white. They're either universally loved or absolutely hated. However, the opinions on Sonic Unleashed are as different as night and day. Some people hate this game and claim it's an example of Sonic going downhill, while others love it, garnering the game a cult following years later. We'll see which side I land on when I finally complete Sonic Unleashed. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of The Completionist. Now, I've been wanting to tackle Sonic Unleashed ever since that episode of Defender came out a couple years ago. While I have covered the public opinion, I feel like I didn't really talk about what I thought of the game as a whole. So everyone, grab your chili dogs, take a bite. And let's do this. Yeah. 06 sold very well, the game was a critical disaster. Most consider it as not only the worst
Thresh
Sonic game, but one of the worst games ever made. And people were rightfully scared when word came out that Sega was announcing yet another new Sonic game. When the first trailer for this game released, everything seemed okay at first. Sonic was flipping a ring in his cool 90s way, nonchalantly whistling the Sonic theme, and then... What happened? People at the time were cynical. You see, development for Sonic Unleashed started right when The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess first came out. And fans thought that Sega was just trying to bite off Nintendo's Lupine transformation style.
Thresh6975338, how are you?
Just give us Sonic Adventure 3!
Okay.
And believe it or not,
Cleaning
Sonic
the garage,
started
making
just
sure
as
all the
that.
streaming stuff
Sonic was originally known as Sonic World Adventure, and that's still the title in Japan today. However, there were so many changes to the Sonic Adventure formula, they decided to give it the title of Sonic Unleashed everywhere else. This title reflected the biggest change this game made to the franchise, the Werehog itself. And sometimes change can be good. I like change. Sonic, change you can believe in. But the obvious question, why the Werehog? According to the game's director, Yoshihisa Hashimoto, they wanted to ensure that new gamers could be more easily introduced to this series. Since hack-and-slash action games like God of War and Devil May Cry were big at the time, they felt that bringing in that style of gameplay would really help. But what is a werehog? Because I'm not sure it makes sense to me. See, a werewolf is a man that changes into a wolf when the full moon is out. Sonic is a werehog. That means he's a hedgehog who turns into a hedgehog. Okay, sure, he's a bigger, slower hedgehog, but he's still a hedgehog. That'd be like if at night, Meowth turned into Garfield. I expect that completing Sonic Unleashed won't be that much different than completing any other Sonic game, except for a few extra tasks. The first thing I'll be doing on my completionist journey is finishing the main campaign, and making sure to get S rankings on every level along the way. While I'm doing this, I'll also have to max out the stats for Sonic, both in Hedgehog and in Werehog forms. Maxing the stats out will only help me achieve those S rankings, but grinding the stats out will be a chore onto itself. Next, I'll have to complete all of the various side missions. I'll be filling out a bestiary as well as a log for every townsperson in the game. And speaking of townspeople, I'll be helping them with specific side missions, including collecting items and exercising the dark energy from people with a camera. Just don't ask. After that, I'll have to gather every collectible in the game. I'll do my best to pick up as many as I can while I also beat the story, but I know I'm going to have to do some backtracking. And there are a ton of collectibles, ranging from Sun and Moon medals to records and VHS tapes, because, you know, Sonic is old school. And finally, God help me, I'll have to complete the hot dog missions, which are essentially time trials and survival levels. I confirmed online that these are the hardest parts of the entire game, but the fact that they're called hot dog missions gives me hope that they're not as serious as traditional time trial levels. How bad can something called a hot dog be?
Not bad, right?
The only thing I'm really worried about are the usual glitches and bugginess that come with 3D Sonic games. I mean that, and also trying to comprehend what a werehog is. I'm telling you, it's like if during the night Jackie Chan morphed into Sammo Hung.
Cleaned out all down here.
If you're going to make as bold a choice as putting a werehog in your game, you better have some technical quality to back it up. And for the most part, Sonic Unleashed does
That's some next level
even if
tech.
it has some trouble committing to a tone. Sonic Unleashed opens up on an epic battle on one of Eggman's ships. Sonic is blasting through robots, causing explosions, and even going full-blown supersonic right in the beginning of the game. He beats Eggman, but is tricked and has all the power drained out of him. On top of that, Eggman then shatters the world into 7 pieces with a giant laser. This summons a creature called Dark Gaia and turns Sonic from the Hedgehog we all know and love into the werehog. This all feels incredibly bad. The stakes are high as Eggman opens up an airlock and Sonic freaking gets launched into space. I would go so far to say that this is the most intense beginning to a Sonic game. He falls to Earth, is caught by a bubble, and then is dropped so that he falls again. Cute, wacky Looney Tunes sound effect. set off with the help of Tails to find Professor Pickles, a J.R.R. Tolkien lookalike whose research on the Gaia manuscripts is to not be a freaking werehog. From the get-go, for every explosion, there's Chip wanting to eat sweets. For every dark Gaia monstrosity, there's Professor Pickle wishing for a perfect cucumber sandwich. For every time a local mentions how scared they are that the world is cracked into 7 pieces, they also ask you to prove that ghosts exist or play a prank on their mom. This really brings down the weight and importance of the dramatic moments and makes the comedic moments just annoying, especially with Chip. Chip is easily the most obnoxious thing in this game. He sounds like a bad SpongeBob impression and is purely there to teach you how to play the game. Whenever he talks, he's either commenting on something that would be so cool to see and needs no explanation, or just talking about food. But the worst part, the part that set me over the edge with this, the sound of his wings. This little fairy creature has little fairy wings, but it sounds like a tap dancer is constantly following you. Basically, imagine Navi constantly talking, and wherever you go, you can hear her following right behind you. So by the time you learn that Chip is absolutely integral to the story, you couldn't care less. I'd rather let Dark Gaia destroy the Earth forever than have to deal with Chip anymore. Now, while I can't stand Chip, I don't hate the design of the werehog. I mean, a lot of things don't make sense concept-wise, but I like the actual look of this beast. It looks like it comes from a schlocky B movie.
Run cam at the bottom.
Sonic gets a lot hairier. His hands turn into claws that rip through his gloves, and his shoes turn into cleats and grow spikes out of the top. Wait, so that means his shoes are actually his feet? Because his hands rip through his gloves, but his shoes transformed with them. Has Sonic been barefoot this whole time? Whoa, I need to lay down. The world of Sonic Unleashed is split into 7 different cities, and I like them all. Each city is a representation of a different culture on Earth. For example, Mazuri is Africa, Apatos is Greece, and Holoska is based on Antarctica. A lot of these cultures you don't really see represented in gaming, so it's kind of cool to see them here. The game actually looks great for its time and is a massive step in the right direction from Sonic 06. For this game, Sonic Team actually developed their own graphics engine called the Hedgehog Engine, and the work shows. The backgrounds are absolutely gorgeous, and when we get a glimpse of the whole set piece, it can actually be breathtaking. You know, I said whoa quite a few times after launching off of bounce pads or while grinding on rails. The models look great too. There are no trips to the Uncanny Valley in this game, and every character looks like they belong in the world of Sonic the Hedgehog. And the locales of each city are really interesting. They often have missions for you and personal reasons behind each mission. They range from getting lessons on love to helping a little girl get medicine for her sick grandmother. However, there is one mission that did not age well. There's a businessman named Boss who meets a little girl on one of his business trips, and you have to deliver gifts to this little girl for him, but you can't say it's from him because it might complicate the transaction. Yeah, that was in a Sonic game. As per usual, the music is awesome. Each track sets the tone for the levels perfectly and makes you excited to play the game. The score for Spagonia and Apatos has a more laid-back feel and makes you think like you're in a trendy European indie film. On the other side of the coin, you get the tribal drum beats of Mazuri, and they feel really intense and make you want to move fast. But my absolute favorite part of the music in this game is when you get an E rank on a level and the celebration music just falls flat. See, Sonic Team, this is how you do comedy. While I am sad that Crush 40 was not involved, there is an awesome song from the trailer that uses the lead singer from Bowling for Soup. Bowling for Soup, Crush 40, and now Hoobastank with Sonic Forces. Now all we need is Yellow Card and Good Charlotte, and we've completed our early 2000s supergroup. A lot about the presentation really works. The game looks and sounds great, and the different cities throughout are fun to experience, but there are still things that raise a ton of awkward questions and distract from the game as a whole. Like, why have Chip in here at all? Or why do you even have a werehog? Honestly, if both of these roles were filled by Tails and Knuckles respectively, I would have no questions whatsoever. But the werehog is here, and it still makes no sense. It's like if at night Usain Bolt turned into Brock Lesnar. From Jamaica to Suplex City, bitch.
more
Sonic Team's
sexy
50-50
stuff.
success rate with
I don't know what to do with
Toad
these
is
boxes.
mirrored in the gameplay. However, while the questionable parts of the story cause bewildered amusement, the shaky parts of the gameplay purely cause frustration. This has a major effect on enjoying the game as a whole. The levels are mainly split into day stages and night stages. During the day, you play as Sonic the Hedgehog, trying to get to the goal as quickly as possible. During the night, you play as the Werehog, engaging in hack-and-slash combat and platforming while trying to get to the goal as quickly as possible. As is true in all Sonic games, your life is decided by how many rings you have, so you always got to have at least one ring. The day stages contain all of the modern Sonic staples, including boosting, the light dash, and homing attacks. These all help you move faster and help you find alternate paths in the level. However, there were two main changes that truly affected my enjoyment for the day levels. The first is the introduction of the quick step. There are certain segments where the camera will pull right behind Sonic and you'll have 3 basic lanes to travel in. Using the L1 and R1 buttons, you can quickly change lanes to collect rings or dodge obstacles. Now this is a lot of fun. These quick dash moments make you really feel like you're faster than anyone else while having accuracy that you don't have when you're just regularly controlling Sonic. The other change comes with the homing attack. Originally, to use the homing attack, you would jump into the air and then hit the jump button again after you've locked onto the target. In Sonic Unleashed, this has changed to the square button. The square button is also used to boost. You see, sometimes the game will randomly decide to not lock onto a target and Sonic will then boost across the level, more likely leading to your death. This alone caused me to have to restart dozens of times and was the most frustrating part of the daytime gameplay. At night, things change a lot. First off, you have a life bar. This is replenished by rings, but the monsters don't care about how many you have in your pocket. When the bar hits 0, you're dead. In order to move through the levels, you'll have to battle your way through enemies big and small, using a combination of light and heavy attacks similar to that of something like God of War. Hell, the Werehog's arms even stretched out to give that feeling of Kratos' Blades of Chaos. Which makes me wonder, is there such a thing as Kratos the Hedgehog? Oh my god. I love it! When you combine these buttons appropriately, you can create some pretty impressive looking attacks. You want to see Sonic pile drive a creature into the ground? We got that. You want to see Sonic body slam a whole group of enemies? We got that too. You can also pick up smaller enemies and either throw them at other enemies or just beat them up to death with each other. If you want to get through the masses of enemies super quick, you can also use Unleash mode, which causes Sonic to move much faster and hit much harder. You also have the option to perform quick time events and beat enemies instantly. But when there are too many enemies on the screen, the frame rate chugs and makes it very difficult to input those prompts. None of the enemies are that difficult anyway, so it's usually safer to just use basic combos in Unleashed mode to dispatch the baddies. There's also a shield, but I never really used it. I just made like Muhammad Ali and rope-a-doped all the monsters. Float like a tail, sting like a knuckles. Defeating enemies gives you experience to level up either the Werehog or the Hedgehog stats, and you can choose who to level up at any time. The Hedgehog stats are relatively easy, needing to only increase your speed and your ring energy for boosting. But for the Werehog, this is a real chore and absolutely necessary. You have to level up combat to learn more combos, strength to hit harder, life to have a longer life bar, Unleash to make Unleash mode last longer, and shield because I have to. The night levels aren't just combat though. There's also platforming. You'll be jumping and swinging from poles, balancing on beams and pipes, and jumping across moving platforms. Your stretchy arms will be helping you move from each of these items. But unfortunately, the lock-on problem from the day stages carries over here. A lot of deaths happen just because the game decided you cannot lock on right now. Both day and night stages end with you reaching a goal ring or getting 1/2 of a boss key. But the most frustrating differences comes with how long it takes to get there. For the day stages, it'll take on an average of maybe 2 to 7 minutes, depending on how many times you played the level. For the night stages, this can take anywhere from 20 minutes to a half an hour, which is way too goddamn long. But honestly, even with that ridiculous length of time, I actually enjoyed the night stages more. I know. All the critics out there say otherwise, but hear me out. Sonic Unleashed gets a lot of heat from the internet.
Candid Witty level. Created by Dr. Eggman. While it looks pretty cool, it is by far the most annoying level I've ever played in a Sonic game ever. Well, Sonic 06 doesn't count. It's a tech demo. It was not a game. Every level so far has been separated into day and night stages, but Eggman Land is the only level in the entire game that combines the two together. You play in each form 3 times each, and each of the 6 parts of this level are the most difficult parts of the entire game. In my first time going through this level, it took me over 80 goddamn minutes to beat. Granted, I kept failing to get a single VHS tape, but I knew that if I didn't get it then, I'd have to go back and get it. This level alone makes the game not even worth finishing, let alone completing. Getting an S rank on every level is a little different from previous games. Getting an S rank on every level isn't just about speed. It's also critical to defeat enemies, collect rings, and get points. However, this doesn't mean you can take your sweet time in the day stages. If you made it past a checkpoint and died, your ring count will start over, but time will continue on. So if you're going for S rank, you probably should just start over. Fortunately, completing the townspeople log in Bestiary is much easier, since you will encounter most of them just by completing the game. The missions from the townspeople were fun as well. Each one of these missions include a small task based on one section of the main level. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if the main Werehog levels were instead split into these townspeople missions, no one would have complained at all. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I have to admit that the internet was right. The most frustrating part of this entire game are the hot dog missions. The hot dog missions are special challenges given to you by various hot dog vendors that you unlock after reconnecting a piece of the world. You pay the man a minimum of 10 rings, and you get to perform a challenge to get a really special chili dog. Now, these challenges aren't really that difficult except for one, and that's Eggman Land. While the other hot dog missions have a combination of survival missions and time trials, Eggman Land is just time trials. First, you have to beat Eggman Land in 75 minutes. While it may seem like I did this already, you have to beat the level without dying once. So if you die anywhere in the level, you have to start it all over again and pay the man again. Moneybags may be an extortionist, but this hot dog vendor is a f***ing sadist. And after you finish the 75-minute time trial, now you have to beat Eggman Land in 65 minutes. And after that, 45 minutes. It took me 8 hours to get this one stupid bronze trophy in my freaking collection. I don't think I've ever hated a single level this much. I really need to think some happy thoughts now that I'm finished with this. Much better. For all the work that I had to do to complete this game, there really isn't anything to show for it afterwards. The only tasks that give you anything are gathering some of the collectibles. You get cutscenes for collecting VHS tapes, music for the records, and concept art for the art books. In fact, in order to get some of these items, you have to bring the souvenirs to Professor Pickles. So for collecting the souvenirs, your reward is more collectibles. Other than that, you get trophies. Finish all the townspeople's missions, you get a trophy. Max out your stats, get a trophy. Beat all of the hot dog missions, including that stupid Eggman Land one, you get a trophy. Get an S rank on every single level? Nothing. You don't get a trophy. You don't even get a fancy splash screen or even some kind of palette change to indicate that all that hard work you've done was worth something. It feels like a complete and utter waste of time. But ultimately, the biggest problem with this game is one fundamental issue. I f***ed up. For some weird reason, I thought, hey, I'll play the PS3 version of the game. That was the wrong thing to do, Gerard, you frickin' idiot. On the PS3, the game runs at less than 15 frickin' frames. Whereas if I play the 360 version, it runs beautifully. The amount of bugs and glitches and asinine bullshit that we had to deal with was insane. More importantly, this episode got delayed by a day because of it. So while I like this game for what it is, do not, and I repeat, do not play the PS3 version. While I completed Sonic Unleashed, there were 297 lives farmed for, 50 trophies unlocked, 509 items collected, 65 hours of total playtime, and one completionist who still does not understand the concept of the Werehog. I mean, come on! It's like if at night I suddenly turned into Brett. Sonic Unleashed has many things that I really like,
But it seems for every good thing the game does, it does something equally terrible. I really enjoyed the weirdness that is the Werehog, plus the annoyance that is Sonic. I love the world building and the atmosphere, but the glitches in the gameplay and Eggman Land really bring the game down itself. And the fact that there's no real reward for completing every S rank in this game left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. Especially in the world of Sonic the Hedgehog, a franchise known for rewarding players for completing the game.
I feel like Sonic Unleashed is this cult game that has to be enjoyed like a cult film, something like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The first half is fun to experience, but the ending leaves this wrong kind of impression to the audience. So, in the end, don't ask too many questions and just have as much fun as you can with the weirdness. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my... oh no! A full moon!
I'm a aware man. With that in mind, guys, I guess I give this game my completionist rating of play it. That's all the time we have for today, guys, but please, as always, let me know what you thought about this video somewhere on the internet. If you liked what you saw, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell so you're up to date on all the videos. And if you'd like to check out last week's video, click or tap that on screen right now. I've been Brett Bayonne, and when the moon sets, Gerard will be back for another brand new episode of The Completionist. See you later.
Right here with you guys today to launch our themed month that we do in the month of February. Last year we had Hero Month, the year before that we had the month of sequels to prequels, and then we had month of sequels, month of love, and blah 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 blah. This month, however, we are doing Disappointing Games Month. That's right, we're going to be playing a lot of games that, by most standards, are bad. I'm going to use the nice word disappointing. You take that with what you will. That said, let's start off the first game of the month, and that is Sonic the Secret Rings for Nintendo Wii. Is it time for another Sonic game already? At this point, I am well aware that I'm gonna get burned every time I dip into this pool, but I just can't seem to stop myself. I mean, what can I say? At heart, I am still a Sonic fan, and the shining ray of hope that is Sonic Mania is getting closer and closer. Plus, I've already played Sonic Boom. I am now impervious to pain. Believe it or not, Sonic and the Secret Rings wasn't even supposed to exist at first. Sega actually wanted their first Sonic game on the then new and exciting Wii console to be a port of Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. But porting it would have taken way too long, so they decided to build a new game from the ground up. I guess they really dodged a bullet there, didn't they? From the get-go, Secret Rings was designed with the Wii motion technology in mind, but you have to understand that this was very early in the Wii's life cycle. No one was yet fully aware of the Pandora's box that was Waggle technology. Used properly, and Secret Rings was the evidence of that. Despite its lofty goals of going back to Sonic's basics and its respectable visuals, Secret Rings received middling reviews due to its awful camera and crippling controls. Now don't be fooled by the fact that this game technically got a sequel in Sonic and the Black Knight. No one liked that game either. That's a fight for another day. And to add insult to injury, Sega actually delisted Secret Rings and all other Sonic games that failed to reach a minimum Metacritic score back in 2010. They were apparently attempting to maintain the value of their brand. But we see you, Sega. We know what you've done and we'll never forget. That being said, Secret Rings should be a swell time. Completing this game won't be as simple as beating it a few times and calling it a day. Secret Rings has its own in-game achievements list called awards that you get for accomplishing tasks and performing feats that are about as demanding as legitimate achievements and trophies. These awards are rather benign, such as beating a particular boss and using one of Sonic's skills 50 times. But others will undoubtedly tack on several extra hours of playtime, getting Sonic to level 99, or playing for a total of 24 hours. Now that last one doesn't seem that bad, but playing this game for 24 hours makes me want to puke! But you know, aren't we lucky? Secret Rings also contains a slew of Wiimote-centered minigames known as Party Mode. It's about as blatant of a Mario Party ripoff as you can get. I've played Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. There are plenty of awards tied to Party Mode, making these minigames unavoidable, like the lima beans on your dinner plate. Okay, I just can't ignore them. I'm just gonna have to try and save them for last, shove them all in my mouth before my tongue knows what's going on, and wash it all down with some Snapple. This is what being an adult is all about, folks. Tricking yourself into doing work. It'll happen to you too, kids. Everybody had their favorite bedtime stories growing up, right? Well, Sonic and the Secret Rings is like a bedtime storybook, but if your mom or dad pulled it off the shelf to read to you, you'd politely tell them to get that bullshit out of your face. It's got some nice visuals and a pretty decent soundtrack, but its story is savagely mediocre. Things kick off with Sonic taking a nap in front of a cozy-looking fireplace that I guess he owns? Wait, is this supposed to be Sonic's house? Does Sonic own a house? Is Sonic homeless? Nope, there's no time. That train of thought will never end. When Sonic wakes up, he reaches out for his alarm clock, but accidentally grabs the mystical ring that he apparently had no idea was on his table. Upon touching the ring, a genie named Shara is released. She claims that her storybook world of the Arabian Nights is slowly being erased by another, bigger, badder genie named Eraser Jin. Yes, that's actually his name. Eraser's been using his immense power to slowly escape from the book and cross over into the real world. And if he's fully released, he'll not only destroy all the stories within the book, he'll also unleash hordes of evil. They're completely different people who don't know Sonic at all, which means that I don't care about them at all. It's just a cheap way to shoehorn in familiar faces into a story that has nothing to do with them. It's truly unfortunate that Secret Rings features so many settings and characters that honestly couldn't give a crap about. You just know that none of these characters will ever know that Sonic won't won't grow or change at all as a character. Sonic will end up saving the day and move on to the next adventure, never mentioning these events again. It somehow ends up feeling like Sonic the Hedgehog filler. I didn't even know that was possible. With that being said, the storybook motif is actually a nice touch. Almost all of the game's cutscenes are told in the picture book style, and if I've got to look at the cutscenes, they may as well be somewhat unique. The themes of the Arabian Nights also permeate pretty much throughout the entire game, from the stages to the enemies to even the music. And that kind of non-gameplay stuff is where Secret Ring shines brightest. The visuals are easy on the eyes, and the soundtrack is pretty damn good, even though it does have a bit of a dual identity. Half the time, the music is Arabian themed, and the rest of the time, it's the kind of metal that's become associated with modern Sonic. But the music is at its best when the two styles are blended together, creating tracks that are truly is by far the game's best feature. Played after every single mission. You hear it so often while playing that you begin to dread turning on the console. It bores its way into your mind. Even right now, you can still hear the same 4 seconds repeated endlessly. Someone make it stop. And for God's sake, if you're going to get a band to do the theme song for the game, get the one that's been doing it for the past 3 or 4. Crush 40. Their rendition of Seven Rings in Hand is even better than this one. The storybook that is Secret Rings has got some pretty illustrations and a nice cover. The actual story inside is nothing to write home about, and its poor narrative doesn't even come close to the worst aspects of the game. At least the soundtrack is tight. Can we hear some of it right now? God damn it, I should have known better. I should have been more specific. I deserve this. Play anything that's not Seven Rings in Hand. Please, anything. Thank you. Even after the many hours I've spent with it, I still feel like I haven't really played Secret Rings. This whole time, it's felt like I've been playing some game or someone changed my controls for this isn't a mini game. This is the game. And these motions are optional. They're always going on. Secret Rings is a glorified endless runner. Sonic moves along an automatic rail, and it's up to you to collect the stuff you want, avoid the stuff you don't want, and defeat any enemies in your way. Your ultimate goal is to either reach the finish line in one piece or fulfill that mission's specific requirements. I know that all sounds, but even the most straightforward tasks are turned into an utter instructed me to hold the Wiimote horizontally like a traditional controller. A faint glimmer of hope was ignited in my soul, but that hope was instantly stomped out by the unrelenting combat boots of reality. In order to make Sonic move to either side, you have to tilt the Wiimote to the left or right. And yes, it's just as janky and unresponsive as you'd expect. Oftentimes, you'll swear that you tilted the controller enough to avoid that pillar. But no, I guess not. If you perform Sonic's patented homing attack, then you're gonna have to jerk that Wiimote forward in an unnatural and goofy fashion. On top of that, you can't even manually select what you're targeting with the homing attack. Since we're not using the D-pad to move Sonic, you'd think we'd be able to use it for targeting. But no, let's just have Sonic go wherever the hell he wants to. And let's not forget all of the level-specific mechanics that also require you to convulse while playing. Swinging, jumping, catapulting, none of them show up that often, and each of them could have provided some much-needed oases of traditional control. But no, gotta push that waggle tech. The controls weren't the only gimmick that Sega tried to force into Secret Rings. This game also has a few RPG elements to it, complete with experience points and leveling up. You gain experience by collecting items, beating bad guys, and generally performing well during missions. If you collect enough, you will level up, earning more abilities for Sonic. Now, what kind of ability? In this game, they're referred to as skills, and there are a buttload of them. These skills behave like little equipable buffs that you can combine in different ways to make Sonic play slightly differently. While some skills give Sonic drastically dynamic abilities, others are predominantly passive in nature and their effects are only somewhat noticeable. These include skills that increase Sonic's top speed, ones that let him dodge left and right faster, and ones that increase the range of his homing attack. But two of the more extreme skills are Sonic's Speed Break and Sonic's Time Break. Speed Break is a massive burst of hyperspeed, whereas Time Break slows down time, allowing Sonic to more easily navigate around hazards. Both of these techniques are governed by Sonic's Soul Gauge, which is basically his super meter. These moves may sound cool, but there's a big problem. Neither of these skills is any fun to use. It may seem like a blast to tap into the Speed Force with Sonic, but it turns out that he's totally vulnerable to all damage during the Speed Break, meaning that you'll probably run right into any threats along your way. This skill is basically rendered counterproductive unless you're on a very clear straightaway. And the Time Break, while useful, just is not fun. Whoever suggested a mechanic that drastically slows things down in a Sonic the Hedgehog several of these mini-missions together into a handful of bigger missions, drastically reducing the amount of time spent loading into and out of levels, and the time spent listening to that goddamn song again! Aside from the usual rings, there are a couple of other collectibles in Secret Rings. There's pearls, which are common items that refill Sonic's Soul Gauge, and then there are the Fire Souls, which are hidden relics that are found in most missions. Most of them are easily obtainable, but some of them can be kind of hard to reach. All of the games as enemies are variations of the same theme of dark genie spirit thing. Unfortunately, they don't offer much of a challenge and they don't offer much gameplay variety either. Most of them just float in midair, acting more as platform aids than enemies. And when you do interact with them, all they really end up doing is slow down the momentum even more. Some of those bad guys do have more involved mechanics, such as the bosses, but even during those fights, the game's focus is heavily on combat. Fighting seems like an afterthought here, as opposed to a secondary feature. All the boss fights can be summed up with avoid their attacks until you're close enough to do a homing attack, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. A bit too brain dead for my tastes. But I'll tell you what isn't brain dead, getting gold medals on every mission. That's right, this game grades you based on how fast you complete levels, which for completionists turns the entire game into a series of time trials. Some of these missions are downright crushing with their criteria for gold. Some medals are virtually impossible to obtain unless you've equipped some of Sonic's more powerful speed boosting skills. And despite their lack of fun factor, Time Break and Speed Break are often crucial to shaving off the seconds necessary to beat the clock. Once again, there was no way around replaying missions over and over until I had the muscle memory needed to simply get good at them all. And let's not forget that Secret Rings is technically an RPG, which means that there are levels to reach. 99 of them to be exact. And even after beating the game and earning all of the gold medals, I still had plenty of grinding to do. Just imagine replaying the same experience-rich stages over and over and over until Sonic is incapable of growing anymore. He might just be at that point, you guys. But I hope that Sonic Mania proves me wrong. I am with you, Sonic. I was from the beginning, and here now I have faith and drive and belief in you. And after all of that, after all of the hard work of finishing Sonic's Adventure Mode, waiting for me was Party Mode. You guys know the deal. You and up to 3 of your friends shake, rattle, and roll your way through dozens of uninspired minigames. Now, full disclosure, these minigames aren't bad, but they're not great either. At least when you open up party mode, you know that you're in for a waggle fest. If you're bored, morbidly curious, and happen to have some compliant buddies around, then party mode might just be the most fun thing about Sonic and the Secret Rings. And after searching very hard, I can't say that there's much to enjoy about playing Sonic and the Secret Rings. And that's the most disappointing thing about the game. Even the most terrible games have something entertaining about them or something noteworthy, but not Secret Rings. Here, there's nothing but a wasteland of mediocrity. And it's not like things weren't salvageable with this game. They could have included the actual characters that we know and love, instead of facsimiles. They could have focused on having mechanics and a UI that maintained momentum instead of constantly interrupting the action. And while it's too much to wish for them to have completely dropped the motion controls, they could have let the game cook for a bit longer before releasing it. Maybe then the waggle tech would have felt better, or at least been bearable outside of the party mode. Dear God, the party mode really was the best part. These might be the end of times, you guys. There's a little bit of a silver lining when it comes to completing Sonic and the Secret Rings. As you've been racing, collecting, and grinding away, you've also been unlocking quite a lot of bonus material. And it's all kept track of in the handy-dandy special book. It's like a gallery where you can view all of your spoils of war, including concept art, music, and cutscenes. All of those Fire Soul you've been collecting also happen to unlock some bonuses in party mode. The more you gather, the more hidden characters you unlock for use in party mode, such as Blaze the Cat, Cream the Rabbit, and both Shadow and Silver the Hedgehogs. Those same Fire Souls will also gradually unlock even more mini-games for you to trick your friends into playing. Even Secret Rings' signature brand of achievements, known as awards, are accounted for in the secret book. Oh, and it also lets you know how many times you've run into Big the Cat. Yeah, I forgot to mention that Big the Cat's in this game too. And I don't mean he's making a cameo as a character from the Arabian Nights. He's just Big the Cat. You can run into him in 15 specific missions, but he's pretty well hidden, so hunting him down with a guide is recommended over trying to find his big ass on your own. If you manage to find him all 15 times, all of the pages of his travel diary will be filled out in your special book, allowing you to read all about his fishing and his obsession over Froggy and the sad fact that he should never be allowed out of the house by himself. So what does filling up your entire special book get you? Not a damn thing, but at least it feels good to know that as you play, you are unlocking things along the way. It would just be nice if the game acknowledged you for going the distance. I wouldn't even be that sore about it if Secret Rings hadn't thrown time trials and level grinding at me. Now, instead of walking away from yet another disappointing modern-era Sonic game, I'm actually presenting Secret Rings. Goddamn, and things just, they could have been so simple, you guys. They could have been so simple. While completing Sonic and the Secret Rings, there were 78 deaths, 32 hours of total playtime, 126 Fire Souls found, 110 golden medals earned, 225 pages unlocked in the special book, 99 levels reached with Sonic, and one copy of the single 7 Rings in Hand ordered off of Amazon so I can personally burn it in effigy. Guys, I have been a personal positive beacon of Sonic and its community for many years. And as much as I love Sonic, it's hard for me to even recommend trying this game. Even for novelty's sake, just getting through the basics in earlier missions is a slog thanks to the terrible controls. And if you're still thinking about completing it, only do it if you've got a lot of money riding on it. Like no less than a few grand. Only a fool would complete this game for free. Wait. I genuinely don't know what makes me more mad. The fact that Sonic 06 was right here and it came out to be a piece of crap. And then in development they said, you know what, let's go ahead and take some of these teammates here and move them over here to Sonic and Secret Rings for a Wii launch release window. And that game turned out to be just as bad. Now, at least from a graphic
setting. You should be able to control Sonic, at least at this point in the 3D realm, with the joystick. You have the nunchuck, plug that bad boy in, and now you have Sonic move in a 360 environment. Why make the gamer, the player, whatever you want to call it, just go straight down and miss collectibles and miss things and constantly get hit over and over again when you create this lush world that you want to explore? I cannot say anything more now without getting actually visibly upset. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of donate it. That's all time we have for today, guys. So please, as always, let me know about today's episode somewhere on the internet. If you like today's episode, do me a favor, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, and you know, I'm actually responding in the comments. So I read a lot of the bad things you say about me, Brian, from Wyoming. Thanks, man. You're the best. Appreciate the nice words, bro. Brian's a dick, that's why. He has to learn. You can't get away with this. That's you, Brian. Be nice, man. Now, if you excuse me, let's go ahead and look at more glorious multiplayer action. That's the cooking sensation smells of wonderfully crafted Sega multiplayer.
You're the completionist.
Yes! Hey everyone, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Completionist. Just a few little house cleaning things to talk about today in this video. One, I'm sick. I'm sorry. I just got sick from going to a convention, so I'm getting better. But you might hear a little, throat tears here and there, so I apologize in advance. Two, I just launched a brand new channel, youtube.com/GerardCompletionist. You can go subscribe right now. There's actually a podcast we do every Monday. There's like a Wednesday show, which is whatever I want it to be. And Fridays, Battle Square, which you guys send challenges to me to do very hard games. And yeah, today there's actually a fan mail video going out. It's a special launch week. So it'll be out either right now or later on in a little bit. So go ahead and subscribe. And yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 videos a week, all about me and what I do for the show. Another quick reminder, YouTube is always changing and it doesn't tell us content creators about what it's changing for. You may have noticed in some of your favorite channels that you're not getting their videos anymore. Because of this little bell right here below the screen. This bell is your notification icon. So if you're subscribed to the channel and you want to be continually notified about all the things we do here, make sure that bell is set to all notifications on. And as one last reminder, this is actually the first episode in which the format of the show is changing, and guess what? There's no longer a spoiler section. up or just there for a secret for someone to tell you something good. When you know what? Sonic Boom comes along and says, yeah, no, screw that. We're not going to do any of that. I'm sure all of you at home have heard of the stories and seen the Let's Plays from the Game Grumps and other YouTubers out there of how notoriously bad this game is. And as someone who's never played this game before, I have to say, I am not excited to get into this one. So here I am, right here on the show, diving in to Sonic Boom. God help us all. The dust may have settled on the war between Nintendo and Sega back in the early aughts, but you can still see the fallout just about everywhere. Sega's officially out of the hardware game. There are far fewer ads out there in which one video game company outright attacks another, and Sega eventually agreed to a 3-game exclusivity deal with Nintendo. The first two of which were Sonic Lost World in 2013 and Mario Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Olympic Games. But rather than merely continue the pattern of mediocrity established by the first two titles, the third exclusive game would sprint full steam ahead toward infamy. From the very start, things seemed a bit off. Instead of being developed by Sonic Team, the third title was developed by two American studios, Big Red Button and IllFonic. And when fans got their first look at the brand new versions of Sonic & Company, it became soberingly clear that something was very wrong. This was not classic Sonic. It wasn't even modern Sonic. This was Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric Sonic, and it was aimed squarely at American kid wallets. Before the game even hit shelves, there were comics, toys, and a cartoon show ready to take the world by storm. But due to the game's baffling redesigns of its characters and obviously underhauled gameplay, it was clear to all that Sonic Boom was meant to be an entirely new entity created just for Western audiences. I guess Sonic Team felt like we should have our own Sonic, who was separate but equal. Thanks, guys. Thanks for giving us Sonic. Upon release, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric was rife with glitches, burdened by terrible controls, and around every corner, there was a design choice that was poorer than the last one. It didn't take long for Sonic Boom to be confirmed as a financial and critical flop, and somehow, it managed to become the lowest reviewed Sonic game of all time. Think about that. In a world where Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 exists, it did worse. I actually felt a little relief when I was doing my research before playing this game. Based on impressions, Sonic Boom doesn't seem any harder than your average give me any more gray hairs, but I got chills up my spine listening to walkthroughs for this game because they simply don't exist. Guides for Sonic Boom are extremely hard to come by on the internet, which means that no one has gotten into this game. We are about to get into some unexplored territory here, folks. But I was able to determine a little bit of what I can expect from attempting to complete Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. We're looking at no less than 2 playthroughs of the campaign, since the harder mode apparently becomes unlocked once you beat the game. This doesn't sound too bad. There are reportedly a ton of collectibles scattered all over the game. This one worries me a little bit since the only guides I was able to find out there are all worded very poorly. And then there's the scariest potential pitfall of all, the fact the game may become unplayable or uncompletable due to some random game-breaking bugs that's just waiting for me to step on. This game is reportedly infested with bugs, and learning to avoid them all is going to be a real challenge here, no doubt. It's Sonic 2006 all over again, back with vengeance. Now, I don't expect Sonic Boom to take too much of a toll on my mental and physical well-being. After all, it's a Sonic game, and I'm good at most of them. But what I am scared of is losing my faith in Sonic himself. As of now, I still love Sonic, kind of, but I don't know if I'll still be able to say that when this is all said and done. You may be a blatantly bastardized shell of your former self, Sonic, but I know you're still in there, damn it. I can feel you. are over, you guys. Come on. The story begins with Sonic and his pals chasing down Eggman. Sonic games, how many years do you need to know the context? It's Eggman. They eventually get cornered near an ancient door that Sonic somehow knows how to activate. Inside, the gang accidentally awakens an evil snake man in a robot suit named Lyric, who's hell-bent on destroying all organic life on Earth with his robot army. Not to be confused with Eggman's robotic army. Two different things, you guys. Very different things. To do so, Lyric has got to collect all 8 Chaos Crystals. Are you just really? And as usual, Sonic and the Anthropomorphic Animal Brigade are trying to collect them all first. Aside from some amusing time travel elements, it's the type of uninspired narrative that you'd expect from a Sonic game. But still, something does feel off here. It honestly feels like Sonic the Hedgehog branding was slapped onto another game. When you think about it, we've got a pretty unique scenario here with Sonic Boom. As far as I know, it's the first Sonic game that's based on a cartoon that's based on the video game. Maybe this was something Sonic Team always wanted to do, but just never had the tech to make it happen. Sonic and his friends have more character than ever before. It's just too bad that said character is grating and cliche. Sonic is a self-absorbed prick, Tails' dialogue is distractingly strained and verbose, Knuckles now has the IQ of a mushroom, and Amy's classic obsessive personality has been replaced with one that can only be described as generic NPC woman. Now once again, I get that this crew is supposed to be totally different from the characters that we grew up with, but these guys are as one-dimensional as they come. And the worst part about them is that they just won't shut the hell up. They're incessantly blathering.
Sweet! Genius!
Booyah! But that's not to say that the voice acting is bad, because it's the actors from the cartoon series, and the cartoon series is pretty good. It's just the writing and the incessant hand-holding. Now that's not to say that Sonic Boom's soundtrack is terrible, it's just lifeless. It's got none of that bassy funk from the Genesis era, nor the extreme rock of the modern era. Instead, we get generic orchestral fluff that you won't remember 2 minutes after turning the game off. Especially since old Sonic music is way better. That goes for the game's backgrounds too. Many of them are actually very pretty, but most of them are nondescript, forgettable locales. But imagine if this bland cave had some allusions to Mystic Cave Zone somewhere within it. Or if these random ruins here had motifs that harkened back to Sky Sanctuary Zone. I'm probably barking up the wrong tree here, but as long as it doesn't hinder the experience, there's nothing wrong with giving a wink and a nod to your old school fans. Especially when the old levels were way better. You know, I'd like to think that the reason the music and the visuals are so subpar is because the developers spent the majority of their time on the game's performance. But no. The game runs worse than that one kid in PE. You know which one I'm talking about. The load times are long enough to make a sandwich in, the frame rate is incredibly inconsistent, and there are pop-ins everywhere. Just check out this footage I captured right here of the game going ape She's clipping in and out. I'm not even touching the camera. I'm not touching anything. I'm gonna put this down. She's just blinking in and out of the frame. How do you explain that? Now, no one expects Sonic games to be graphical powerhouses, especially on the Wii U, but at the very least, they should run well, shouldn't they? It's pretty hard to get into Sonic Boom when every time the game stutters, you have to wait and see if this is it. Is this the moment that the game finally decides to die on you? Like during this fight scene right here. There are so many enemies on screen that the game slowly becomes unplayable. But see, I can't tell if the game's few good merits are intentional or just happy accidents. It's so inconsistent in its presentation that the whole thing comes off as insincere and gross. It feels like an advertising monster put on a Sonic the Hedgehog suit and is trying to trick us into believing that it's the real Sonic. Only it's painfully obvious that it's not. Like one of those Spanish Sonic the Hedgehog ice cream sticks. You know what I'm talking about. What's wrong with your eyes, Sonic? The really scary part is that the monster thinks that we are all dumber than we really are, and it's waiting for its moment to make its true intentions known. Just what the hell do you want, monster? Oh, all right, yeah, you want our money. You want our money, that's right.
These are okay, but there's scratches in it. I have to polish them out.
Sonic Boom's gameplay is the hottest mess that ever hot messed. Boring, shallow, and glitchy as all hell, getting through the game doesn't require that much skill, but it does take a whole lot of dumb luck to successfully avoid all the game-breaking bugs. And do I mean dumb luck? Let's just say this game's version of Knuckles might be just the right kind of guy who might actually enjoy Sonic Boom, even if he did miss leg day. The platforming that one would expect from a Sonic title is present and accounted for, kind of, but it's joined by other gameplay elements that are a bit more foreign to Sonic games. But let's get this out of the way. Sonic rarely, and I mean rarely, moves fast in this game. Whether due to the structure of the levels or to the game's processing failing to keep up, there just aren't that many instances that feature Sonic's trademark speed. The main sections where you'll get to go fast are these action sequences that resemble endless runners, except, you know, they end. These running sections would be a great place for speed freaks to get their fix, except that they're one of the main places in which the game's frame rate slows to a crawl. Sonic is now trying his hand at puzzles. They're tedious, overly simple, and I'm pretty sure I saw a kid die from trying one. Okay, that last part's not true, but the puzzles in this game really do feel like half-hearted efforts that come nowhere close to challenging or fun. These puzzles are often color-coded in case it wasn't already obvious which character's abilities are supposed to be used to solve it. Pink. Pink means Amy. Jump. Amy. Jump. Good Amy. Gold star. With the ability to freely switch between characters, each of whom with their own set of special moves, Sonic Boom's combat would be somewhat enjoyable, if it wasn't so monotonous.
Okay.
Hey kids,
Done.
you like Sonic's homing attack?
Need
How
to
about
like-
Knuckles' dig
Yeah,
attack?
that's it for
Well,
me.
you ain't gonna use none of that stuff because their basic attacks are too
There's a little
good.
bit of-
Almost
you can
every
see some
enemy in the
glasses
game
there.
can be easily bopped by simply spamming.
yeah,
You
I
may have
probably
to
don't like
remove a
that.
shield every now and then,
Okay,
but it's
move it up.
right back to mashing after that.
Oh,
And
well.
connecting all of the choppy races, obvious puzzles, and mindless battles together are vast barren hub areas that take far too long to traverse. They're where you'll be doing the majority of the item hunting, as well as where you'll be accepting side missions from some of Sonic's helpful pals, like old Cliff. Remember Cliff? Feels like he's been here for forever, huh? Where would we be without good old Cliff? In all seriousness, these NPCs all look like they were fan-made characters from DeviantArt. Now, DeviantArt, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just saying Sega's been stealing your shit. Just pointing it out. But even if the core gameplay were up to snuff, none of it would be able to stand up to the combined might of the deadliest world tag team champions in all of gaming. Unresponsive controls and stiff camera angles! Let your guard down during a fight. Don't you worry, unresponsive controls will lead you to getting comboed to death. Transitioning from a 3D view to a 2D one? Prepare to fall off a cliff thanks to that camera angles. And on top of that, one of the biggest issues with this goddamn game is that all the characters have no invincibility frames after being hit, meaning that everyone can be straight up comboed into instant death if 2 attacks hit them at the same time. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Come down here, Lyric. Come on, baby. Come on. Come on. Come to Papa. Come, just come down here. I'm tired of waiting. Just show. Okay, there you are. Here we go. God damn it. No. Okay, here we go. Go after Lyric. After Lyric. Come on. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I got hit twice. I got hit twice with invincibility frames. Jeez. Ah. Do you see this? Now I have to do this whole phase over again. Ah. Go get out of the way. Come on. Ah. Just get down here already. Thank you. Ah. These technical issues are, without a doubt, the worst and most difficult aspects of Sonic Boom, not the bosses, or even sitting through the characters' consistent babbling. Just getting from point A to point B without something going wrong was a rare occurrence. It's incredibly frustrating to be stopped in your tracks by systems that are supposed to help you. Naturally, Sonic Boom asks you to collect tons and tons of collectibles, and yeah, they don't end up giving you much of anything in the end. Rings function the same as they always have, but they're slightly more useless when you consider the fact that Sonic Boom has no lives to speak of. There's no such thing as a game over, and when you respawn, you'll restart extremely close to where you died. The other main collectibles are those robot scraps that you get from destroying enemies and opening poorly hidden chests all over the place. Their only uses are to open up access to new locations in the hub areas and to purchase team upgrades. There are hidden crowns scattered throughout Sonic Boom's levels as well, but before you go and get your hopes up, all they do is unlock more barely useful team upgrades for you to purchase. And then there are the shinies, which can only be detected by their shiny trail. To do so, you have to use Sonic Boom's Ava system, which allows you to see hidden areas and objects. Not that these hidden objects are too hard to find in the first place. In fact, using the Ava system altogether is wholly unnecessary. Look, devs, you made this game, and it's bound to the Wii U gamepad. You could have done a lot more with it! Come on! When you found the glowing X at the end of the trail, using a ground pound technique will unearth your prize. It's just too bad that these prizes are literal garbage. And wouldn't you know, their only purpose is to be traded in for collectible crowns. Completing side quests will reward you with items called power glyphs, which will unlock techniques for your characters. But unfortunately, they're also just passive buffs, like decreasing the time it takes to charge a special attack, or an automatic energy shield you get from when you run out of rings. There's a special team upgrade that can only be unlocked by playing and completing Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal for the 3DS. Yes, in order to technically complete this game, you need to buy and play through an entirely different game. The power-up that you get for doing so lets you hold an increased amount of rings, which personally is not worth the effort at all. And the funny thing is that I ended up enjoying the portable version of Sonic Boom way more than the console one. So for those of you who need a little emotional support while playing this game, there is a co-op mode for the main campaign. But buyer beware. The visual quality and frame rate will hit the floor once another player joins. Surprise, surprise. There are also multiplayer minigames known as team challenges that pit you and some friends against one another in combat arenas, obstacle courses, and item collecting modes. But these minigames feature the same basic control and camera issues as the main game, so good luck with those ones. After beating the game one time through, Extreme Mode opens up, allowing you to subject yourself to Sonic Boom all over again, but this time with tougher fights. But even with the added difficulty, the game is still remarkably easy. Beating each level on Extreme Mode gives you a star next to that level, tracking your completion progress. With all of the collectibles finally locked down, I was well on my way to completing Sonic Boom. And then it happened. One level, and only one level, refused to give me the star for beating it on Extreme Mode. No matter how many times I finished it, the star would not unlock. I looked for help online, I even tried reverting to previous saves, and nothing worked. It was truly and utterly broken. Okay, so Extreme Mode is on. I am at the end of Crater Lake, and all I'm gonna do is walk over, okay? I'm gonna grab this ledge right here, pull it back, the crystal's gonna show up. We got the rock. Yay, we got the rock. Okay, so now we're gonna get it. Now, this level is officially beaten. On Extreme Mode, it is done, which means that if we did it correctly, God forbid the game actually worked the way that it was programmed, what's gonna happen is we're gonna see a star next to Crater Lake. Except that's not gonna happen. I guarantee you, this is my 13th goddamn time doing this. I did it on co-op mode. It just won't happen. I've looked online. Apparently, there's only 2 or 3 posts of people doing this. I kid you not. And no one's complained about it. 1 or 2 people. Just people forgot. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go to the map. Everyone! Crater Lake, there's no star. There's no star at Crater Lake, but everything else I have a star at. This is a hub world, so it doesn't have a star. The hub world doesn't have a star. The rest of these have a star, except for Crater Lake! God damn it! After enduring everything that Sonic Boom threw at me, in the end, it cheated me out of what I had earned. So here I am now with a game that's complete, or in this case, incomplete, depending on how you want to look at it, And that's what hurts most of all. Sonic Boom insults your intelligence. It doesn't respect your time, and it's a chore to play through. If you manage to turn your brain off, you might get some mild entertainment out of it. That is until you encounter your first glitch that halts your progress right in its tracks. With so many different collectibles in Sonic Boom, there's bound to be a treasure at the end of the bullshit Rainbow Road, right? Surely getting all that junk will unlock some sort of concept art or something, but of course not. It's a Sonic Boom, the 9th layer of hell. It makes me a little sick to my stomach to report that you get absolutely nothing for collecting all of the items and beating Extreme Mode. I would say that there's no 100% bonus either, but for all I know, you unlock a fully playable HD remaster of Sonic 3 and Knuckles when you complete the game, but I'll never know because this game won't let me complete it. Sonic Boom should have been a relatively simple challenge, but its shoddy gameplay and many bugs turn it into a monumental task that overshadows any good qualities it may otherwise have. Now, I may not have lost a lot of sleep on this one, but I lost a lot of my patience. And what was left of my adoration for Sonic got yet another swift kick to the nuts. I just hope that when Sonic Mania comes out, it'll erase my memories of Sonic Boom from my mind. While completing Sonic Boom, there were 46 deaths, 33 hours of total playtime across both Rise of Lyric and Shattered Crystal. This is what you get for completing Sonic Boom Shattered Crystals for the 3DS. A dance party. A utter garbage. I cannot believe the glitches. I cannot believe that it wasn't fixed. I cannot believe that this was sold and marketed to not only children, but to Sonic fans everywhere. Look, I've played Sonic 06. I have played almost every Sonic game here on the show, and I will say, Sonic 06 and Sonic Boom are just as bad as each other. They are literally twin replicas of tech demos. Tech demos that no one should have had to have played or bought for $60 goddamn dollars. The only good thing that Sonic Boom has going for it is the cartoon show that it's inspired by and the voice acting cast that's been behind the Sonic franchise up to this point. But other than that, this game has nothing to offer. Go outside, play Pokemon Go, take your 3DS with you, go hang out with friends, go see a movie, do anything that is not Sonic Boom. So with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of donate it. that's all the time we have for today, guys. So please, as always, let us know what you thought about today's episode somewhere on the internet. A big, big, big thank you to Good Blood Games, Javed, who did an incredible job helping us restructure the format of the show. All these assets. Look at this stuff. It looks so cool. It gives the show just an overall cool, energized vibe, and I hope you guys dig it. This is kind of going to be a forever changing thing as we move forward, so it's going to get better. There's going to be newer things. It's going to be fun and exciting, and I hope you guys stick with us as we move forward into the future of the show. Now, if you excuse me, I'm just going to go for a walk. A long, long walk.
Don't forget to bring Sonic Boom with you.
I'm going to take Gronk. Monsters Gronk.